Hey there, friends. Welcome to those of you tuning in live and waiting a few extra minutes. Thanks, appreciate that. Like any good band, we try to let the crowd get warmed up first. Then we take the stage. So here we are. The stage is Harrenhal, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
And how'd you enjoy my Harrenhal video?
As soon as once we got there, once I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, I hope he doesn't cover all of Qoherys. I have things to say about House Qoherys."
I knew you would. I was planning on giving you the chance. So
Yeah. It was great. It was a great setup, and there were a lot of things that I could relate back because I did my house. It segues nicely into my House Lothston video, which I'm going to be referencing when we get back here. Once we get to the Lothstons era. But yeah, like we definitely have a lot to talk about when it comes to
we definitely have a
Harrenhal.
lot to talk about. So let me give you guys the background on this. I recorded an entire 90-minute plus Harrenhal video with all of the history, but after I got past the first bit, there's not too many images to use, and it was just me straight up dictating and reading to the camera, and it wasn't fun enough. Like, I had more fun calling up Tim and Maynard James Plum and like debating the ins and outs of the Lothstons and the Harroways and the scandals that we're going to talk about. And I was like, that was really fun. I need to have Grey Waste Tim on so that we can, really get into these controversies, because it's mostly about the story after the beginning. Like, I really enjoyed doing the cinematic thing with Harrenhal's burning and all that stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. But to get into this history, this would be the better way. And of course, Tim, as I was discussing with him, had things that I hadn't caught, being that he's got a really sharp eye for this kind of history. And it's funny, Tim, how much of Harrenhal's history is just the history of the Targaryen dynasty. So much of it runs through Harrenhal, both because of its proximity and it's close to King's Landing, and just because of the history of it. So that's one observation I had. And the other thing that I really want to set out to frame this discussion is how much Harrenhal really is like the One Ring. And another person in the comments compared it to the Titanic, which is another similar idea. It's like this hubristic thing that kind of shouldn't exist. We're pushing the boundaries of like what man can create. And it's just too big. It's too big not to fail, as somebody else said in the comments or the chat. I forget which it was. But yeah, Harrenhal, everyone who tries to possess it, when I really got into the idea of the curse, it's like, oh, this is the thing that should not be. And it's a lot of the curse is the fact that the people who try to possess it are mostly very grasping, ambitious, hubristic people. Whents clan, straight from the slums of Harroway's town. That's the joke. Anyway, I just wanted to be consistent with the videos. But yeah, those were my two things, like the One Ring thing, and then just how much this runs through the Targaryen history. What were your meta thoughts?
Well, first, because I am seeing the shirt comments from chat already, so yeah, it's Danny DeVito as a vampire. It's Never Sunny in Transylvania. We are talking about Harrenhal, so everyone seems to always enjoy the shirts that I bring onto the show because I try and make them relevant to the topic if I can.
I think the chat knows that we both put a little bit of extra thought into our shirt design. Yeah, that is part of what we bring here. So all I got to get you to do, Tim, is turn on that colored light on your background and then pick a slightly different color than me, and we'll be like right there. See, we got your head. Your head used to always be down here. Now we got you up here. We're getting there.
Yeah, slowly but surely, I'm getting better. Every video, every stream, I get a little bit better.
That honestly is how it works. I'm giving you a playful hard time, but of course, appreciate you very much and all your contributions. And you guys know, if you're not subscribed to the Grey Waste Tim channel, it is called Grey Waste Tim, and it's very easy to find. And your latest content is definitely sizzling. The lies and oranges video, and the meme-tastic stuff you've got going on. I did not see that side of you coming, but in any case.
Oh yeah, I sent the next video I'm working on will be the next Be Like video, The World of Ice and Fire, which is going to be bloated. I got like 60 slides I've made. I sent Dave 2 of them. But yeah, we're circling around 3 continents for this one, so a lot of meme humor.
Sean, you're always catching strays for me. You have to put thought into your wardrobe, buddy. I expect more from you, Sean MacArthur in the chat. Somebody pointing out Harrenhal, Terra Incognita. Harrenhal is very the tower, as in the tarot card. We talk about the tower because George is definitely, it's one of his favorites. He's using it with Euron and Bran, all their tower transcendence and stuff. But yes, it has to do with disaster and sudden upheaval and things like that. Oh, John Haymaker. That is for us to know and you to wonder, are we wearing pants? You never get to know what a YouTuber's wearing beneath the waistline. That is part of the magic of what we do here. So, in any case, so yes, the burning of Harrenhal. Did you have anything to add about the either the construction or the burning that I did not cover?
Well, I did point out, I made it in the comment section of your video, but yeah, the blood, the line about their blood being mixed in with the mortar, that House Whore had worked the people of the Riverlands to death in the construction of this, and had gone way past the point of thraldom into full-blown slavery. And I brought up how George might have been referencing Poltergeist with that one. If anyone's familiar with the film Poltergeist, the story is that the house that's haunted, like, Carolyn, don't go into the light. It's built on a graveyard, and they move the headstones, but they never move the body. So the line with Harrenhal about there being blood in the mortar, on top of it being made of weirwoods that have been cut down, like very much gives like this this poltergeist feel. And as you said, like it's a monument to hubris. It's made of weirwood trees that have been cut down, but it sits on the God's Eye, the eye which overlooks the Isle of Faces. So it's like spitting in the eye of the old gods to build this out of the tree, out of the sacred trees, right in front of this island where the Green Men more than likely are making home. It's like, yeah, it's very much mocking them. So that plus the poltergeist thing, it's like you're just inviting trouble. By Harrenhal's very existence, it's just an invitation to trouble, because it's like mocking. It's playing with a Ouija board and mocking everything.
So I showed this artwork during the video, and this is by Ted Skis. And here you have a couple of children of the forest cheering on Aegon the Conqueror as he burns the castle. I like the sentiment here. Like, yeah, they couldn't have been disappointed. And you raise a great point. And Harrenhal really is a good example of how George ties in his magical world building and his thematic writing. It's all of a piece. So yes, Harrenhal mortared with blood. Well, literally, they worked people to death. So it's mortared with blood in the sense that people are dying to make it, but it might also be some magical thing that Harren was doing, right? Okay. And then so the same thing with cutting down the sacred trees. Well, that is wrong in a deep sort of thematic way, violating nature and all that. But those trees are also literally haunted. So that's a mechanism for actual magical mechanics as well. And then the God's Eye. One of the things I wanted to talk about with the construction is the God's Eye a hinge of the world? Probably, right? A shy and the wall are the two that we know. But if we go looking around and think, a hinge of the world in its most basic idea, it seems to be the idea that there is a spot, a physical location that has magical power. We don't know if it's a natural thing or if it is accrued because people practice magic. Like the wall, it might be a hinge of the world because the wall was created with this huge sorcery. Or it was already a hinge of the world, which is why they chose that location to build the wall. I lean towards the latter. Same thing with a shy. They probably built around Stygian because there was magic there, potentially, or they tapped into it at some point. What's your thought about the hinge of the world and the God's Eye? Oh, I'm sorry. Just to your point about the thematic thing, we're also defiling the God's Eye, like you said. Yeah, it's a sacred place. You have the monstrous thing. So it's thematically defiling it, but it could also be magically tapping into the power of the God's Eye when we see all these witch queens and people doing sorcery here. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, because when Melisandre drops the line about hinges of the world, that does give the implication that there are multiple ones. Now we can look in real life, we have our 9 wonders of the world. In story, George gives us Lomas Longstrider and the wonders of the world inside the world of Ice and Fire. So the idea of there being more hinges other than just the wall and a shy, what are our possible candidates? Yeah, the God's Eye definitely seems like one of them. This island in the middle of a lake that no one can get to. Anyone who tries to is blown off course, or flocks of ravens and crows chase them away. But for some reason, Howland Reed, who is one of our most magical characters, is allowed, just on his little skimmer, just by himself, is allowed to go. I guess I'll tack on spoiler warnings for House of the Dragon, because we will be talking about Alys Rivers stuff. Adam of Hull was able to fly there on his dragon. The battle over the God's Eye with Aemond and Daemon, well, they're not actually on the Isle of Faces, but they're on two massive dragons in the air overlooking it. It doesn't seem like the Green Men really had any way of dealing with that. Like, oh crap, that's like two nukes flying over us. Our crows aren't really going to help us in this situation.
And that probably is a good place to go ahead and just give a quick Hot Dragon spoiler warning. We are talking about Ice and Fire history. We are going to get into House Strong. So there will be some House of the Dragon spoilers. We're not setting out to spoil House of the Dragon, but certain events that flow through Harrenhal we will mention. Queen Nettles is in the house. Let us all pay homage. Girl Nettles, have to have you on here soon to address the controversy of your non-existence. They're stealing your dragon and giving it to Rhaena. Maybe. Hopefully not. But we all have that sinking feeling. Yeah. So if Nettles isn't on the show, Tim, we're going to have to think of a way to really have fun with this season on the after show. You're going to constantly be like, ask her why her scenes were cut. I filmed the scenes, but I don't know how they just didn't use them.
Man, like, if they cut Nettles, Ryan Condal is never going to be able to show his face at any kind of convention without the fans immediately. Like, that would be the first question of, why'd you cut Nettles?
I hope everybody is nice and polite, but I wouldn't mind seeing, like, where's Nettles signs or something. But let's all be decent, of course, to our actors and various showrunners that are in public who do read comments and tweets and things sometimes. But Ryan in particular is not on Twitter. Good, I'm glad. Good, it's better that way. But in any case,
George is about to attend Worldcon, and we all know what he said last time he was supposed to go to Worldcon before the pandemic. So people are getting that cottage on the sulfuric lake ready for him if he doesn't have winds ready.
Oh man, I want wins to be done just so I can be happy for George to have the monkey off his back. But in any case, I do have the Nettles video if you're interested in that story. I've got a video about the whole controversy and the leak and what Nettles means to the story and all that. So check out that video if you want that one. Super chat from James. Want to bring a small Warhammer reference to this, which I don't know. Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy, false inevitability. I'm not quite. Yeah, I guess when you talk about the curse, like, I ended up my scripted essay kind of saying, is it cursed? Well, more than anything, it's cursed with residents, with its occupants. It's very hubristic, grasping, venal, etc., and cruel overlords that live there. So yes, the castle and the people, it's all of the same archetype. That's why I was saying about Harren. Like, the castle is a description of the man groping at the clouds, reaching for the heavens. It's all of a piece. And thank you for the super chat. But yeah, it's Warhammer, I do not know. Tommy's like, I know Warhammer. I'll get this one. Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate you.
I know a bit about Warhammer, and I am making a couple references to it in that next meme video. Orkmont, Great Empire, Yin, they all have Warhammer references.
Yeah, I used to play games when I was younger, but I just am always occupied with this channel. So, nothing big, just happy to be here. Hey, Jenny of Lothstons, we're all happy to have you back. So yeah, we'll come back. I've got a couple other things about the construction of Harrenhal to talk about. Rhaegar's theory has to do with oily stone, and he's asking, where did all this black stone come from? Could Harren have quarried it from the same place that Moat Cailin was quarried from? And could Harrenhal accidentally or intentionally be built out of the same oily stone that Moat Cailin is, and nobody realizes it now because it's all melted and stuff. But we know that the oily stone is cursed, or appears to be, at Yin and Ashai at least. Like, the nature won't mess with it. The babies and children and animals don't live in Ashai. Like, the sea stone chair also, I think, is mildly toxic. Like, Baelin's aging might be a clue about that when Theon sees him. Maybe not. It's just a little bit of oily stone. It's only mildly, magically radioactive. Don't get me confused. George is doing a fantasy version of radioactivity at Ashai and Valyria, not actual radioactivity. But it is very similar, and it's certainly inspired by that. So yeah, I think any oily stone is toxic. So it could be that part of Harrenhal's curse and its magical power is based on the stone that it was built from. Because again, where did he get all of that black stone? We don't know.
Yeah. I mean, with Moat Cailin, it's black basalt, and given that these are Ironborn, I wouldn't be surprised if he was literally stealing from Moat Cailin. Like, the crumbled towers, like, we're just going to repurpose this.
Well, it'd probably be hard to haul those blocks out of the swamp, but that stone must have been quarried from somewhere. So yeah, it could be some more of that in the Riverlands. And the other oily stone idea is like, oily stone, I'm pretty sure, was created by meteor impacts. So the thing is that a meteor is like a dragon symbolically. So there's this weird parallel with the fused and the oily stone. Fused stone is made when an actual dragon breathes fire onto stone. And the oily stone is made when a meteor dragon breathes its outer space, Lovecraftian magical fire onto the land at Ashai. And it creates oily stone, I think. That is my theory, which I believe Tim agrees with. So could it be, yes, that dragon fire is magical, and that what happened at Harrenhal is like half of the fused stone process, essentially. We got the dragon to burn the stone and melt it. All we needed was for some Valyrian fire mages to be there to like arrowmance the molten stone into the shape of dragon gargoyles and then harden it into place, and then it would look like dragonstone. So that's what I was joking, is that like Harrenhal is one half of the fused stone process. And what happens if you stop it in the middle? Did the dragon fire melting the stone imbue it with some sort of magical power? And is that similar to oily stone? This is, again, these are Rhaegar's ideas. I didn't want to put these in the video, but your thoughts, Tim?
I can see that. Like, if like you said, we're melting the stone, but we're not reshaping it, so it's left half done. It's like the lid has been left open, and now all that's when you leave the lid open, what's gonna happen to what it contains? Well, it's gonna rot. Like, think of leaving food out in that sense, and possibly, I think that makes a good analogy for what you're striving at.
And I see someone in the chat asking, the oily black stone, it's not in, it's really in the world book. It's not even in the main story. In the main story, we see the sea stone chair. It's made out of an oily black stone carved into the shape of a kraken. There is more of it. So the city of Ashai is built entirely out of that stone, like the sea stone chair. There's a fortress in the jungle in Sithorios, the southern continent, called Yin, which is mysterious and cursed. And then there's also oily black stone near Yin on the Basilisk Isles, called the Isle of Toads. There's a weird toad idol. It's kind of like a Lovecraftian element in the story. So yeah, there's a couple videos that my mods will drop if you want to check that out. There is one called the Oily Black Stone in the Great Empire of the Dawn series that is all about this. So yeah, it's probably, look, I think it's more likely that the dragon fire might have imbued some magic into it than Harrenhal actually being quarried from oily stone. But just because Moat Cailin might be oily stone and it's not far, and we don't know where its quarry is, it could be that the quarry is south of Moat Cailin, just below the neck, somewhere in the Riverlands, and that's where Harrenhal stone comes from, which it means it might be related to that. So not likely, but I did want to just throw that out there because, it's fun. So, yeah. But then the weirwood part, obviously, that's the most obvious reason for a curse or even residual magic that could be tapped into. Even though the wood is burned up, there could still be magic lingering.
Yeah, you don't even need the black stone in this sense because the weirwoods in and of themselves make up for it because the weirwoods are the homes of spirits, as we've discussed. Children of the Forest, we've seen in Bloodraven's Cave, children of the forest, when they reach the end of their life cycle, kind of hook themselves up to the root system of the weirwoods. We've talked about the others being spirits of the weirwoods who have been evicted. So, yeah, just in case, just like that poltergeist reference, building out a weirwood is basically hollowing out the homes of children and others and whatever other spirits are lurking in them. So it's literally building on top of a graveyard without moving the bodies. Like the poltergeist metaphor really holds up well with Harrenhal through the use of weirwood trees.
So that does lead me to the question: why did they retain a weirwood tree in the Godswood, but cut down so many other trees? For some reason, that was important to do. I can't really figure that out, other than just George wants there to be a Godswood in the castle. I guess it's tradition, but yeah, there is one. In any case, yeah, I gotta think that Daemon did sleep with Nettles, but obviously, if they change that, if they give Nettles stuff to Rhaena, then they're not gonna do that. They're not gonna have Daemon sleep with his daughter. I'm pretty sure.
So even with Targaryen incest, we've never seen that. We've never seen father, daughter, mother, son.
Yeah,
like that.
Or unless,
maybe Aegon the Unworthy, but
yes,
he's depraved.
We'll get to that. The one possible case of it is in the history that we're going to read today. So, House Qoherys. You said you had a couple things to add to Qoherys.
Yes. Okay, so Qoherys is the fourth Valyrian house. We have Targaryen, of course. We have House Velaryon. We have House Celtigar, who are the redheaded stepchildren. They're crab people. Qoherys
Now you listen up here, Mr. Tim. Mr. Greyways Tim, before you open your fat mouth, start flapping your gums about Cracklaw Point, about the good crab man on Cracklaw Point. We're all good dragon men right here. No, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, Qoherys, for the short time that they were around, were a fourth Valyrian house. And now that name, Qoherys, sounds alike Qohor, which is one of the Valyrian free cities. And Qohor is important because Qohor is the one city that has the swordsmiths who know how to reforge Valyrian steel. We get the story of a maester who went over there and tried to learn the secrets, and they chopped off his hand for it. In our main story, we have Tobo Mod, who is the guy that Gendry was apprenticing under. He's the one who reforges Ned's sword Ice into Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper. So a Qohoric link to Westeros would be pretty important for the establishment, for reworking Valyrian steel. So this fourth Valyrian house being originally from Qohor makes a lot of sense. And then you look at the names too. There's Quentin and Gorin. They don't exactly sound Westerosi. Now we have Quentin Martell, but that could be a Rhoynar name. Qoherys sits on the Rhoyne. The Rhoyne is part of their logging industry. They cut down trees in the forest of Qohor. They ship them down the Rhoyne. This is what's Aragorn's tax policy. Like, look, Rhoynar river rights and Qoheric forest rights are important here. There will be a quiz on this later. It is not open book. But yeah, so this Qohoric link seems to be there with the names that sound more from Essos and more rather than Westerosi. And yeah, and then we get another connection to that, which is when we get to our main story, another Qohoric person who will end up in Harrenhal, which is Vargo Hoat, who will be fed his own arms and legs by the mountain. So yeah, so Qoherys being this fourth Valyrian house, I think that they originally are from Qohor.
That is a really interesting observation. I did not make the Vargo Hoat Qohoric connection. That really does help point it out, doesn't it? And the whole black goat symbolism fits right in with all the other devilish Harrenhal stuff. So I just ran a quick poll. Who's the coolest non-Targaryen Valyrian house? Velaryon running away with it. And I agree. The Driftwood Throne and the Seahorse stuff is awesome. It can't be beat. But we got Qoherys and Celtigar dueling it out for second place here. 14 and 15.
Yep. And
Come on, you crab man. Stand up.
So another link to that too is like first we can see their sigil right there. It's very sinister looking, 4 skulls around a flaming X. Qohor with the black goat has a lot of Satan imagery. It's like the sigil of Baphomet, and a lot of the Harrenhal houses will have this hell imagery, especially too when we get to how many of the next houses that take over are named Lucas. We'll have Lucas Harroway, Lucas Lothston, and these are all subject to the name Lucifer. Which is weird because George does give us a few characters literally named Lucifer, like there's Sir Lucifer Long and stuff. So, but the Lucas name is a subset for Lucifer, and we have at least 2 Lord Lucases for Harrenhal from 2 different families.
I think there's another. Well, there's also Lucamore the Lusty, who's related. Oh, yeah. So there's at least 3. Yeah. So 3. And then there's Lucerys Velaryon, but he's actually a strong. So that's 4.
4.
Yeah.
And we said once something's done 3 or more times, it's no longer a coincidence. Now it's a pattern.
It is. Yeah. Lucifer Dryland is in the south, but yeah, he's there too. Thanks for repping. Lord Lucifer Dryland. And there's Lord Lucifer Hardy, I think. That was someone from the Cracklaw Point. Lucifer Massey. Yeah, there's a few. But that is the answer of why there's so many Lucases connected to Harrenhal. So it is all infernal symbolism. So there's our poll. 66-22 to 13. Velaryon. Velaryon is the coolest. I will agree with that.
And of course, having so many characters named Luke is just more of George's Star Wars fandom coming out.
Yeah, they're all bad, though. So that's cool. I like that Qoherys observation. And the other thing you'll notice is the Whore sigil on YouTube. That's Hoare, House Whore, as in hoary beards. And House Qoherys. House Qoherys seems to be clowning the sigil of House Whore. It's the same shape. They've taken the chain cross and turned it into fire. That's Saltier, by the way, that pattern, I believe. Or is it Rayon? No, Rayon is the Harroway one. That is Saltier, I believe, the cross with the wavy. I don't know. It's the heraldry stuff. But yeah, they've turned all 4 of their symbols into skulls. It's like, oh yeah, your boats, your trees, your grapes, your birds, all dead.
Yeah, they're all dead.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah, shout out to House Euler. Who is Persephone? What do you mean, who is Persephone, Girl Nettles? Lots of people are Persephone in the story. Nissa, Sansa. But what's your Saltire? Yeah, and Celtigar, probably, since they're not basketball players like the Celtics, but more like the Celts. So it's probably House Celtigar. Yeah. Just don't say Qoherys or Quarth.
God. Yeah, there's no you. There's no you.
Yes, Red Kraken is probably coming in season 3 of House of the Dragon. Not because he's like ultra important to the story. He does play a role, but just because he's a cool character. It's like, if you're going to, he's the Ironborn character to have on the story. They've established the Ironborn. People will see an Ironborn and be like, oh yeah, the pirates. So yeah. You don't even have to set him up. Easy introduction. And that gives him a chance to go back and do a better Euron. Like they screwed up Euron so bad and cut Victarion, and Asha was cool for a minute and then just kind of petered out into insensibility. So this gives them a chance to like do it a little better.
Yeah, because if we were to think, like, what was Euron like when he was a young man? Probably Dalton Greyjoy. Dalton Greyjoy is 16 years old while he's out running amok, so...
I don't know that Harrenhal represents the underworld, Girl Nettles. Underworld locations are more like the crypts or the chambers under King's Landing. They're usually underground locations. Harrenhal, the whole point is that it's reaching up to the sky. It's like a hand groping at the heavens. So it's more like a Prometheus, like Lucifer rebelling against God, the Father. Like that's the story. It's that striking up at the heavens kind of story. So there are.
I'm sorry. If you're looking for more of a biblical reference, Harrenhal's probably more like the Tower of Babel, this monument of hubris.
Yes, absolutely. The chat was saying it right as I was talking about reaching for the heavens. Yes, Tower of Babel. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Yeah, because there are women in Harrenhal. There's definitely strong female characters, but they're not really trapped, like Alys Rivers or Mad Danelle Lothston. These aren't like prisoner women. They're empowered witch queens. So I don't really see that storyline here. Arya, we will talk about Arya. I guess maybe she could fit that idea more, but she becomes the ghost in Harrenhal herself. So that's kind of inverting that thing there. But let's So that's probably everything we have to say about Qoherys, yes. And I will also flip on this slide right here. This one's got our dishonorable mentions. One honorable mention and several dishonorable mentions. So you see the timeline here. I didn't run through it, but you can see it. House Whore, a couple months it possessed Harrenhal. I guess like -40 to 1 or to 0, you'd say. But then Qoherys for 37 years, Harroway from 37 to 44, Towers from 44 to 61. Then Rhaena Targaryen acts like a custodian of Harrenhal for like 12 years until it's given to House Strong. House Strong goes until 131, and from 131 until 151. We don't know. Like, Fire and Blood leaves off with Alys Rivers at Harrenhal ruling as a witch queen, and then it's not given to anyone else for 20 years. We don't know what happens in the meantime. We're waiting to find out. Yeah. So then we get to, it's possessed by Lothston for a long time, and then Whent. And then in the main story, it starts changing hands again. We see Tywin come and take it after Roose Bolton sort of sold it to him, selling out the Starks. And then Vargo Hoat is in charge of it for a while. And then down in King's Landing, Joffrey gives it to Janos Slynt, who never actually goes there. And then Tywin shows up and he's like, you did what? No, you're not giving that to Janos Slynt. He takes it back, gives it to Littlefinger, who also hasn't gone there. So we will get into that history as well. But that is the overall timeline.
Yeah.
You could, Shella Whent seemed trapped. I mean, she's just living there alone with her ghosts, and then she gives up the castle, but we don't have any information about her, so I don't think George is trying to do a Persephone thing because there's not a story. We don't have her story. So,
yeah. The one correction I would make there is about, again, regarding Vargo Hoat. I wouldn't say he ever really controlled it, because the story of Vargo Hoat here is he's originally hired by Tywin. He turns Cloak on Tywin to join up with Roose, only for Roose to then turn Cloak on Robb and join up with Tywin. And then that's when Vargo is given over the mountain. You can't turn your Cloak twice. Vargo Hoat choosing to side with Roose really shot himself in the foot when Roose turns Cloak.
I think that the way that we're reading the curse, though, is like anybody who puts their hands on it.
Yeah, basically.
The only one who doesn't suffer from the curse is Rhaena Targaryen, but she doesn't actually become Lord of Harrenhal. She literally shows up there to take care of the small folk after House Towers goes extinct. So she's old at this point, and she basically lives out the last 12 years of her life taking care of the small people at the castle. But other than that, everyone who touches it is cursed. So like Tywin goes there for a little bit, and he ends up obviously shot by his son on the toilet. Vargo Hoat is fed, he eats his own body parts by the Mountain. The Mountain is killed in a horrible way by Oberyn and the poison, and then he gets turned into a zombie. And Littlefinger obviously is getting something terrible. So yeah, it's.
When it comes to Rhaena's probably the one who looked at Harrenhal and said, like, I could see her walking down the corridors of Harrenhal talking to the ghost saying, there's nothing you can do to me at this point that's going to hurt me worse than anything that's already happened. She is one of the Black Brides of Baelor. Her daughter will be the one who dies from the fireworms after leaving with Balerion. Another husband will murder her friends. Her lover will steal dragon eggs and run off with her. Like, Rhaena got kicked so many times in life. The curse couldn't hold up to her, to what she had already experienced.
Yeah, and this is the first Rhaena, Cheryl, not the one in House of the Dragon. This is the elder sister of Qoherys and Alysanne. So we're going to talk about Alys Rivers. We're going to have a big section on her, so just wait for that. And let's see, what was the other thing I was going to say? Something I saw in the chat. Oh, Roose Bolton. Yeah, he's probably going to get killed by Ramsay in some horrible way. So that's coming for sure. Yes. So, okay, so let's get into House Harroway then.
Okay.
First thing about House Harroway is that, well, let's see here. Where did they come from? Probably Harroway's town. Harroway's town, there's basically two possibilities for Harroway's town. One, it built up as a suburb of Harrenhal and was named after the lords of Harrenhal, who were the Harroways. But the Harroways don't come from anywhere that we're told. And they clearly make up their sigil based on the castle. It's a black castle on fire. It's clearly a reference to Harrenhal. So they created their sigil, just like Qoherys did, when they became elevated to lords of a castle. So where did they come from? I'm guessing Harroway's town existed first, because it's a market town on a river. It's a logical place to have a town, right? It's on the river, right?
Yeah, it says, so Lord Lucas Harroway receives titles and lands after the extinction of House Qoherys in 37. So this is during the reign of Aenys Targaryen. And Aenys, we know, was the type of guy who wanted to make people like him. So it's possible that that Lucas was awarded this through some kind of leal service that made Aenys feel like, okay, you did something that deserves a prize. I'm going to give you Harrenhal. Something I talk about in the House Lothston video is how often Harrenhal is used as a bargaining chip more than anything. It's always used as a way of buying favors or as like a thank you of sorts. So it comes a backhanded thank you the more time goes on, but that's always been its purpose. And
yeah, it's mostly like the Targaryens are just trying to find someone to babysit it because it's this problem they don't know what to do with. But they also don't want to put somebody too powerful, as you pointed out to me on the phone. They don't ever want to put somebody too powerful there because it's close to King's Landing and it's in the middle of the Riverlands and it's a huge castle and it's very defensible if you have a huge army and if you're not fighting against Aegon the Conqueror.
Yeah, it's something, again, another thing I point out in the House Lothston video is, like, you never, aside from the little bit of time that Tywin held it, there's never been a big name attached to Harrenhal, except for Rhaena Targaryen, of course, who's just living there kind of rent-free for the last years of her life. But other than that, yeah, like, the true curse of Harrenhal is that it makes you house poor. It's too big it's too big, to update, to keep upkeep on, unless you have a lot of coin. So that's why you never see it in the hands of, like, it's never given to houses like Lannister or Tyrell, who would have the means to bring it back up. It's always given to these C and D list houses,
Right.
who have just enough money for just for the day-to-day expenses, but never to remake what Harren the Black had created.
And we could see that when Arya's in Harrenhal, she observed that the Whents were only living in like one or two of the towers. Like most of them, they weren't even inhabited, and they weren't even living in the whole tower. Like it's so big, right? Black Harren constructed it because he wanted to basically conquer a good portion of Westeros. You know, he was conquering the Riverlands. He had the Iron Islands already. That was a foothold for him to further conquer. So yeah. And thank you for the PayPal question. We're kind of answering it, Isabella, right here. But yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, it's literally the same as owning a home that's too big. It costs a lot of money to keep up with the house. You have to maintain the yard and everything in the house, and you got to clean it, and like you don't even need it, right? So I made a joke at the very end of the script. It's like, what's the lesson of Harrenhal? It's like, yeah, grasping people, this and that, and like also be content with a normal size house.
Yeah. Speaking as a homeowner, it's like, if all of your money, if your entire monthly income is just going to pay for your mortgage at the end of the month, you're in a bad spot, because you're never going to be able to save. How are you going to pay your other expenses? How are you going to pay for food?
It's a boondoggle. It's a boondoggle.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the dream of homeowners, so many.
Yeah, the property tax on Harrenhal alone. So this is Alys Harroway, obviously, by Amora Tiarte. And I've got another Alys Harroway here, where she's getting involved with that guy. Maegor the Cruel, that's him. This Maegor is also Amora Tiarte. And Alys Harroway is on the bottom, on the right. It's Cerise Hightower on the top, Tiana of the Tower, and then Alys Harroway of Harrenhal, which has towers. So Maegor likes tower women, clearly. I don't know if that's intentional. It's 3 times. I guess Alys Harroway's not named Tower, but there is a house Towers that comes from Harrenhal. It's very much, I mean, her sigil is Towers. So anyway, yeah, this is Chad Gore, Targaryen, if you will. Maegor did lots of things wrong, John. Don't trigger me. I know you're just teasing me. So yes, these 3 women are tied together in the story of Maegor the Cruel. You want to summarize the beginning of that history there, Tim?
Yeah, so Maegor, by the end of his life, will have had 6 wives. These are the first 3. At first, he's married to a Hightower, who also happens to be the niece of the High Septon at the time. But she is unable to get pregnant or carry one to term. And Maegor blames it on her, of course, because it can't be anything wrong with my seed. The problem has to be with you. Which is another one of these Henry VIII things. We see a lot more of that with Aegon the Unworthy, but it starts here with Maegor. Of, you need to make me a son. So then he takes a second bride. So he's like, okay, this isn't working. So then he takes a second wife, and that will be a woman of, this House Harroway. Alys Harroway becomes his second wife, and this starts the first big schism between Maegor and the Faith, which is Maegor's looking at it like, well, I'm a Targaryen and we practice polygamy. I'm allowed to have a second wife. And the Faith is like, no, we're okay with Aegon the Conqueror doing that. He was because we saw him as, we were like, okay, it's fine for you, but the idea is that no, Aegon, part of Aegon's, I'm not sure, I don't have the word, but part of what allowed Aegon to rule was this idea that his children would be raised in the faith, and that while Aegon was given certain rights, that from this point on, your children are going to follow more Westerosi custom, and that the first crack in that happens when Aenys marries his sister Rhaena. And that's the first time the Faith is like, wait, you're not, no. We were fine with you having 2 wives, and you only had sons, so they had no sisters to marry, so we were cool with that, but Aenys, no. So then Maegor starts pulling these same shenanigans with taking a second wife. It's like, no, we're not going to do this. But of course, how do you argue with someone who has a dragon?
So Kyle, Father to Bears, I would say that I almost agree with you. Maegor is the most Valyrian of all the Targs, not the most Targaryen. He represents the archetype of the cruel Valyrian slave lord. He does the most things that are similar to the atrocities that we hear about from Valyria. But as far as what makes Targaryen, if you buy my theory about Aenar Targaryen, then House Targaryen started by defying and upending the ways of Valyria. And even if they didn't have a hand in pulling off the doom, you'll notice the Targaryens did not practice any of the horrible stuff besides incest that the Valyrians were known for. Aenar brings his household slaves to Dragonstone, but then we don't ever hear of slavery again because it's illegal in Westeros. So they probably become the small folk, some of the dragon seeds on the islands. And then, yeah, they don't do blood magic. Aenar doesn't have slaves mine dragon glass on Dragonstone. He doesn't do that. They're not making new dragon horns or Valyrian steel with blood magic. They're not doing human hybrid experiments. So either Aenar pulled off the doom as an abolitionist, and that's what I think is what George is implying. It's kind of like Elric of Melniboné, actually, who destroyed his own empire by passing judgment on it, essentially. Spoiler alert. Or the Targaryens simply chose to leave that stuff behind. So I do think that House Targaryen is trying to they are trying to deal with this Valyrian legacy, and you see it flipping back and forth. Like, Aegon conquers, but then he's pretty even-handed and pretty fair as a ruler to the people that he's conquered. And then you see Jaehaerys and Alysanne. They did more for Westeros than anybody that we've ever heard of, like ending the Lord's Night and making the roads, all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, we have Daenerys, who's using dragons to free slaves and end systems of slavery in the same place her Valyrian ancestors committed atrocities. So Targaryen is fighting for its soul, if you will, with Valyria being the bad archetype and Maegor sort of exemplifying that. So that's how I would express that thought. But yeah, he's very Caligula. Yes, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, and as Chad is pointing out, like, Maegor is the one who sets the precedent for the idea of the Mad Targaryen. This line of every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. And that because Aegon the Conqueror has 2 children. You get only 2 results, heads or tails, and Maegor was the bad one. Aenys, for his part, was weak, definitely a weak king, but wasn't mad.
Moore's Code Food is mentioning Ptolemy the Eighth for you history buffs. I do not know his story, but I might look into it later. Thank you. So Maegor marries Alys Harroway in a Valyrian wedding ceremony on Dragonstone. And this is part of the inspiration for, like, you know, Daemon and Rhaenyra did the same thing later. We saw that. There's just a little bit of bloodletting and, you know, Valyrian stuff. So the show was kind of filling in the details there. I thought they did a cool job. The Dragon Keepers, and they're wearing these old customary robes that are like cream white and red. So that they looked like what you might imagine old Valyrian ceremonial robes to look like. I thought they did a great job with that. So something like that happened. And then, so Maegor's married to Alys Harroway, and Cerys Hightower is estranged from him. And Cerys Hightower, of course, is from Old Town. So the Faith and the Hightowers are like this. So they're very offended. And they put pressure on Aenys to do something. And so Aenys gives Maegor a choice to put Alys Harroway aside or to accept a temporary exile. And so he accepts the exile because he's Maegor and he's not going to give in. So him and Alys Harroway go to Essos, where they meet Tiana of the Tower. And when Maegor comes back from Essos, when Aenys dies, Visenya calls him back so that they can usurp Aegon the Uncrowned, essentially, which Maegor does by killing him with his dragon. They come back with Tiana of the Tower. And then shortly after, Maegor marries both Tiana and Alys Harroway not in the same ceremony, but Alys Harroway participates in the bedding and the lovemaking, when he marries Tiana. And that's what this famous artwork is. I would assume that's Tiana in the bed and Alys standing up, but this is Maegor's third wedding. And I kind of believe this because Alys Harroway, like, this is the first clue about her character. And I think the artist is right on the money here, drawing her in a sort of witchy fashion. She married Maegor. Then she went to Essos with him. And then she was like, yeah, let's bring Tiana into this. Like, I think Alys Harroway is all about this stuff. Okay. She comes from Harrenhal. So she may have already been feeling the witchy vibes. What do you think?
Yeah. So like for more context, so when Maegor leaves, when he rather chooses the exile over setting aside his second wife, he goes to Pentos, and that's where he brings Tiana, and that's another Daemon connection. We saw in House of the Dragon, Daemon, when he married Elena, he's living in Pentos, and Daemon has his own Eastern woman with Mysaria, the White Worm, who's from Lys. So let's check our present day stories. Well, Varys, our schemers of Varys and Illyrio, Lys and Pentos. So Mysaria, Lys, Tiana, Pentos. You see, like, how this is all going hand in hand again. And and it's during this 5-year exile. He doesn't stay the full 5 years because while Maegor is over in Pentos, Aenys will die. He will die of presumably natural causes. Maybe Visenya helped him along. And that's when Maegor comes back. And that's when Maegor takes the crown. And we get the dragon fight between him and his nephew, Aegon the Uncrowned. And then there is the big fight where the faith declarant, the faith militant is like, no, this isn't happening. And we get the trial by combat. The trial by 7. And right. Maegor will win, but he will suffer a head injury, and he will be in a coma for a couple of weeks. And it is Tiana who, along with the help of Visenya, they are the ones who bring him out of this coma. But it's after he wakes up that his cruelty will jump to 11. Like, he's never the same after he wakes up after that.
Yeah, and George, even though there's definitely plenty of signs of cruelty before that, several, when we covered them in our live stream, there's no question it gets worse. And George has commented that, like, this affected him and that it's something to consider. So doesn't obviously excuse Maegor or remove any agency from him, but it is part of the story of what happened to him. So a lot of times we see that with monstrous killers and people in society, like, there's something wrong and bad stuff happens to them also, right?
Yeah.
And when I say something wrong, I don't mean like neurodivergent. I mean like Cersei pushed her friend down a well when she was 11. Some people are just like that. I don't know why, but
it's another Henry VIII connection. I talked about, again, with Aegon the Unworthy being like Henry VIII. That's with the fatness and the womanizing. But another thing about Henry VIII was he was a very charming, tall, striking, charismatic prince. But he has a accident where he falls from his horse. And he survives it, but afterwards he's never the same again. He falls, he has a concussion, he falls asleep. Same thing with Maegor. You're not supposed to fall asleep when you have a concussion, we're told. But these guys are in a coma. And when Henry VIII wakes up after this fall from his horse, he's never the same. That's when he starts getting, and it's after this moment in history that he starts getting fatter and crueler, just like Aegon the Unworthy. And just with Maegor's not doing the fatter part, but he definitely is doing the crueler part after awaking from his coma, after having this head trauma.
Girl Nuddles thinks Cerise Hightower is the problem. I don't know. I'm looking more at Maegor and Tiana myself, but that's okay. It's all in fun. I think that's a Team Green dig there. A couple super chats real quick. What do you do if you gain lordship over Harrenhal? Seal it, get a loan from the Iron Bank, and use it to build a new seat opposite of the God's Eye. Don't think about it ever again. Yeah, I would. I'd like take out a big insurance policy on it, and then like, oh man, it collapsed again. It's total. I can't live there anymore. I'd take the stones down and just, I don't know. I'd build like a monument or something out of it. Like you have to. That's why I was wondering about Gargan the Guest. Like when they took him to the Godswood and castrated him, that could have been the small folk of the castle demanding that action, to try to appease the gods, I think. And then James says, I feel there's balance here between Moorcock's Elric and Ted Williams' Simon. Elric representing peace through power and Simon representing peace through good governance or justice. Competing influences, but the same goal. Offers intriguing thought. You mean like in House Targaryen as a whole? Sure. So, okay. So with this Harroway story, so they're wed now, and Cerys Hightower is back in King's Landing. And now what's happening is that Maegor is on Project Have a Son. He still hasn't had a son. And so he's sleeping with these 3 women on different nights. Alys Harroway, Tiana of the Tower, and Cerys Hightower. All these tower women, I assume they live in different towers. And he just goes up and down the stairs. He's very fit. That's why he's got the abs. It's up and down the towers. So
he's the Stairmaster, yeah.
Stairmaster for the win. So the controversy comes in because Alys becomes the first to become pregnant and everyone is happy. But then she gives birth to what might be a lizard baby. It's ambiguous. A monster with twisted limbs, a huge head, and no eyes. So there's no scales, there's no claws, and there's no tail. However, some of these traits are also seen on the lizard babies. Twisted limbs, no eyes in particular. So given that Maegor had a bunch of other lizard babies, this is probably what that is. I just wanted to give you the description, though, to say it is slightly ambiguous. So, at first, Maegor blames the results on the people who were taking care of Alys, the midwife and the septas and the Grand Maester. And by blamed, I mean that Maegor killed them all, had them all put to death. The Grand Maester. He killed 3 Grand Maesters, one of whom he killed before the accident. When he came back to Dragonstone and took the crown, the Maester spoke up for Aegon the Uncrowned, and Maegor cut his head off with Blackfire. So again, kind of a violent dude already, but yeah. I digress. So Maegor executes all these septas and his second Grand Maester. Tiana of the Tower, however, knew different. She claimed that Lord Lucas, in a desperate attempt to get his daughter pregnant, had been recruiting various men of known fertility to sleep with Alys on the nights that Maegor wasn't. And Tiana produced a list of 20 men who had slept with Alys Harroway. And then Tiana has them tortured in secret. And all but 2 confess under torture. And one man supposedly still had the gold that Lord Lucas Lothston had paid them. And we skipped this part. When he marries Alys Harroway, he promotes Lucas Lothston to Hand of the King. Lucas Harroway. Sorry. A lot of Lucases. To Hand of the King. Right?
Mm. Yeah, and this is the thing, like...
or am I getting that confused with Lothston, who is also Hand of the King?
The Loths... Yeah, Lord...
I don't think Lucas Harroway is Hand of the King. He's just in King's Landing.
I know Lothston becomes Hand of the King under Aegon IV. What happens to Lucas Harroway?
Well, the main thing is that he's in King's Landing, and Tiana claims that he has paid off some of these women with gold and stuff. And one of the men who says that he slept with Alys Harroway, they find the gold. They find the Harroway gold that he had paid. Okay?
No, this is Harroway is killed along with all the other. It's after once Tiana tells Maegor the story of, well, she was sleeping with other men. That's when Maegor orders the extermination of the entirety of House Harroway.
Oh, you're getting ahead, Tim. You're skipping ahead. We have to torture some people before we go to Harrenhal and genocide House Harroway. First, because there's a twist, right? So after they produce all these confessions, they then torture Alys Harroway. Tiana and Maegor torture Alys Harroway for 2 weeks before she dies. And I need to stop and think about that. Like, these three were lovers. They had some weird menage a trois thing going on. And then Alys is tortured by these two people who were her lovers, one of them being her husband. Like, it's just unreal.
Yeah. So two weeks is a fortnight, correct?
Yeah.
There it is again, the fortnight, night fort. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the one who supposedly had Lucas's gold is noted to have 12 sons, because they're trying to find men of known fertility to sleep with Alys. But think about it. If you have 12 children, not sons, children, like, do you think Tiana threatened him and threatened his children with torture if he didn't confess? Oh yeah, that's Harroway's gold. He paid me. Yeah, totally. Don't kill my children, please. Like, so yes, then the genocide. Then Maegor goes to Harrenhal. They kill all the Harroways. Then they go to Lord Harroway's town, and they kill all the Harroway relatives there. So it's just really over the top, right?
Yeah. So yeah, you were right. So Lucas Harroway was made Hand of the King. He holds that for 1 year until he is then killed in this Harroway genocide, and he is thrown from the Tower of the Hand.
Right. By the Kingsguard. And then the Kingsguard go to arrest Alys, and they cut down several of her sisters because they grab her from bed, probably in the middle of the night. And she's sleeping with, like in one of those big medieval beds with her sisters and handmaidens and things. The Kingsguard just cut down a bunch of the women, arresting Alys Harroway. So I just wanted to point out, like, the Kingsguard have been enabling bad kings for a long time. Long before Aerys. Maegor didn't have a normal son.
Yeah, no normal children.
Yeah.
They all either died in the womb, or if they made it to birth and they came out as these monsters.
Yeah. And yes, there's a lot of Andrew Tate energy, at least with Maegor stands, if not Maegor. Sorry.
I think most Maegor stands are just being tongue in cheek.
Some of them, yes, like Girl Nettles is obviously.
Yeah, we're tongue in cheek.
Troll extraordinaire, Girl Nettles. Maegor the Magnificent. You guys. All right, so yeah, doesn't sound like we did a trial before we flung Lucas Harroway from the top of the Tower of the Hand. Doesn't sound like he was given a trial. So yeah, Tiana convinces Maegor that this is what happened, and he goes with it. And yeah, her other cousins and kin are flung into the spiked moat around Maegor's holdfast, where it can take a long time to die. So that's horrible. 2 weeks of torture, killed all the Harroways, and Maegor the Cruel ruled for 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days. So, is what it is. Did a few things wrong. This was one of them. This was a few of them. And thus did the 7-year reign of House Harroway as Lords of Harrenhal come to an end. So, the question here is, what is the truth of this? Because it is possible that Lucas and Alys Harroway were feeling the pressure to produce a son for Maegor, and obviously Maegor's already established himself as kind of insane and cruel, and we know how important this is. He also basically disrespected and denigrated Cerys Hightower and cast her out of favor because she couldn't produce an heir. So this is already a dynamic where, like, he's blaming his wives. Okay. So did they try to find a secret surrogate father? Maybe. It's almost certain that 20 men is an exaggeration. Because you wouldn't do that. You would probably find one and try over and over. There's no reason to have 20 different men. Like, that's just a calumny. Like, that's something to make the story more crazy.
Yeah. The second,
but yeah, what do you think?
Because even if it was a successful, as soon as the kid comes out, if he doesn't have Valyrian features, Maegor's already going to be questioning that. So the idea of getting 20 men, like, you're already running a huge gamble. Now, I guess, but again, like you're saying, this is coming from the Maesters, and we know how the Maesters feel about women. It's very misogynistic. So yeah, 20 men, 20 men, that's a stretch. But it also gives us a connection to the Conqueror and his wives, and the idea that we've talked about a number of times that neither Aenys or Maegor were his either. That Aenys might have been fathered by one of Rhaenys' favorites. She was constantly the singers and the mummers that she entertained, as we're told, and that Visenya doesn't get pregnant with Maegor until she's in her 40s, which in a medieval is already very, like, that's really, really cutting it close, especially in a medieval time. And we talked about that Maegor might be more of a black magic blood magic experiment than an actual person. Like, he's more of a homunculus, and that's why his swimmers just keep making dragon babies.
I do buy that theory, and I don't want to get too into that because it's really cool and it'll take a whole bunch of time. But yeah, I do think that is implied here, and that Maegor was never had a chance to have
normal
kids.
Children.
Probably not. So yeah, I like I said. So the chat is making two observations. One, it'd probably be hard to find 20 people willing to cuck Maegor.
Yeah.
Like, that takes some balls, so to speak. Also literally, but yeah. That's kind of a crazy thing to do. And they're also making Ramsay Bolton 20 good men jokes. I need 20 good men.
Yeah, Sir 20 of House Goodman. Yeah.
20 men of known fertility. Anyway, so, when George writes, he has said that with Fire and Blood, he does not always necessarily have decided what the truth is. He enjoys writing these multiple rumors, fog of history events, and then just leaving it to us to sort of play with the possibilities. So there might not necessarily be a right answer, but when I look at this story, I tend to think, yeah, maybe there was one, or two or something, but I think 20's got to be false, which means it might all be false, because two of those people didn't confess under torture, which means they held to their truth even under horrible Tiana of the Tower black cell torture. They insisted they were innocent. Did they do that out of loyalty to Lucas Harroway? No, they probably did that because they were telling the truth. So, yeah, let's make up a poll. So what do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think the 20 men is BS. I mean, the idea that they got maybe at least a few guys, at least one bull, I guess we could say, to try and do this, to try and get Alys pregnant so that they can then try and pass off the pregnancy as Maegor's. Yeah, I can see it happening at least once, but not 20 times, not from Tiana. And we'll see this more when I mean, I don't know if we're going to dwell on it because we're talking about Harrenhal and not Maegor, but Tiana definitely was the jealous type. And so it seemed more like she was the one who's like, well, if I'm not going to be the one to carry the child, then none of you are going to do it.
Yeah, and then Tiana, of course, later, when the suspicions turn on her, she confesses that, like, oh no, all the lizard babies, those were my fault.
Yeah.
I did that. And then Tiana is tortured by Maegor, who cuts out her heart. And this is this artwork here. And let me give you some artists, too. I haven't been saying them. This is Kieran Yanner. This is from Rise of the Dragon. That's Tiana's heart that Maegor cut out with black fire. This is Tiana by I Levis I is the name of the artist. This is a very nice one. And this is by Chili Ravenart. This picture is sometimes labeled as Alys Rivers. This is, in fact, Tiana of the Tower. And let's see, this one, I had told you that one. Okay, yeah. This one is by Andrei Peruvkin, Maegor's Third Wedding. And then Magali Villeneuve on the right. And, of course, Amora Tiarte on the left. So, yeah, let's see how our poll is doing here. Slept with no one else has 35%, 36. Slept with one or two others, 44. And 20 good men as 19. So the chat tends to lean in the same direction I do. Maybe there was one or two. It does make sense that they might try to do that. But they certainly, 20 is, that just seems kind of far-fetched. And it's possible that she could be totally innocent. So that's a pretty interesting result there. So then what happens, Tim?
Yeah, so after, with Maegor or with Harrenhal?
Well, I guess that's actually pretty much it with the Harroway story.
Because next Harrenhal will go to House Towers.
Yes. So the one thing I want to go back to with this idea of where did the Harroways come from? Was it Harroway's town? This to me makes sense because it's like, well, we just had House Qoherys being stewards of this castle. Because originally it's like, what do we do with it? It got burned. What do we do? Aegon gives it to Qoherys, who's a castellan from Dragonstone, so one of his men. But that backfires eventually with Gargan the Guest. Commits atrocities on on the populace that he's supposed to be ruling over. So now what would we do? Let's put a local in charge. That seems like what they did. They went to Harroway's town, which is the nearest town, and they took the current most powerful dude, probably the mayor of the town, the current Harroway, and they said, you're promoted. Or maybe his brother or son. And they said, here, you guys take care of Harrenhal. You know the locals. You have connections with these people for generations. Maybe you guys can take over Harrenhal. And so I think that is what's going on here. So when Maegor comes back and kills all of the Harroways, even in Harroway's town, it's like you can see the whole curse from start to finish. You know, they plucked somebody out of the locals, put him in charge, and it backfired so completely that there's now no Harroways left, except for the name on the town, Harroway's town.
Yeah, I can see when Aenys promotes Lucas Harroway to Harrenhal, I could see him trying to do the same thing that his father did. His father did with the Riverlands after the Conquering. The reason House Tully is the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands is because, one, Aegon wanted a local, like you just described, but he couldn't give it to someone like House. He couldn't give it to the Bracken or the Blackwoods. That's just asking for trouble. He gave it more to this like more mid-tier house, someone who was more compliant. That's how the Tullys get raised to prominence, because they were not a high house before this. They were never like kings of the rivers, like all these other houses that claim to have been. So I can see Aenys doing the same thing of like, okay, I want to give Harrenhal to a local, but again, I can't give it to someone too powerful. Oh, this Lucas Harroway guy, he seems to be doing good. Maybe, and again, like specific reason, maybe Lucas Harroway earned it through leal service, and this is his reward. But again, it's not being given to a high prominent house. It's being given to this guy who kind of came out of nowhere, but he is a local, and it's like, okay, well, let's see how you do.
And they were probably involved in throwing down the rebellion of Hare and the Red, because that was done by Tullys and other Riverlanders, and also the Hand, Alan Stokeworth, which is another Crownlands Riverlands house.
Yeah, Lucas Harroway may have just distinguished himself in taking care of Red Heron, and that could be why he got it.
Yeah, I think that's right. So our poll has, Alice slept with no one else, 34, one or two others, 47, and 20 good men, 19. So that's about where it's going to be. Good job, guys. And now we are going on to And this makes me weep just because like this was a good idea. Put the locals in control. You know, unfortunately, just the other question is, why did Maegor choose Alys Harroway? Like, he needed a second wife. The first one he chose after the Hightower, who was probably set up for him, was Alys Harroway. Why? Did he like the creepy Harrenhal vibes? Was he attracted to her? Was she already witchy and that's what Maegor was into? Probably, because they went and, like I said, found Tiana and seemed to all three get along. So, yeah, I just have to think the fact that Maegor chose her and the fact that she seemed to be down with Maegor says that Alys Harroway may have already been kind of a dark character.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I mean, if we want to go all Freudian with it, the idea that men are looking for a mommy replacement, and Maegor's mother Visenya is already pretty witchy. So if Alys Harroway is giving out those vibes, he might be looking at like, yeah.
There it is,
Mommy.
Tim. There
Mommy.
it is. Beautifully well said. I mean, George always thinks about that stuff. It's right there. He's looking for his mom. He's trying to find a Visenya. Oh my God. You have just psychoanalyzed something out of Maegor that I've never heard anyone point out.
That explains both Alice and Tiana, the witchy.
Yeah,
Maegor just like goth girls. I understand. I like them too.
Even Cerise Hightower, like the Hightowers are mystical and magical and ancient and like, yeah. Oh, well done, Tim. Okay, so we're moving through the horrors of this Harroway related stuff. And now we come to House Towers. There's not a lot to say about House Towers. Will you say it though, while I go and get my Persephone trapped Cleo from her,
sure.
her nightmares.
So House Towers rules for 17 years from 44 to 61. The way they get it is after the Harroways are snuffed out, Maegor basically he pulls an Alexander the Great. The legend of Alexander the Great is that on his deathbed, when asked who the empire should go, who should be a successor, Alexander says, to the strongest. Maegor does the same thing. Harrenhal goes to the strongest, and we end up with this bloodbath of all of these knights just killing each other one after another because Harrenhal is the prize. It is this one of these knights, Sir Walton Towers, comes out on top, but he is gravely wounded. He's named Lord of Harrenhal, but he dies again 2 weeks. So within a fortnight of winning this Harrenhal melee, he dies, succumbs to his wounds. But he has a son. His son Jordan will inherit it, and so Jordan becomes like the real first Lord Tower of Harrenhal. But as time goes on, his line starts to decrease. And it coincides with Harrenhal also decreasing, because after the Harroways are snuffed out, Harrenhal actually loses a bit of its land. Some of it goes to House Butterwell, some of it goes to House Derry. Harrenhal shrinks in size. And it coincides with this family, the Towers, who will also start shrinking, because with each generation, less and less children will be born. Within 3 generations, they're down to a very sickly kid named Maegor Towers, named in honor of Maegor who essentially gave them Harrenhal through this blood melee. But he's very sickly, and he'll die at 9 years old. And that's when Rhaena, it's during this time that little sick Maegor is living, that Rhaena Targaryen ingratiates herself with the family and becomes a caretaker for him until he unfortunately passes away. You're muted.
What was the Alexander the Great thing you mentioned as I was walking away?
So Alexander the Great, on his deathbed, when he is asked who should be your successor, because Alexander had 2 options. He had 3 wives. One of them was pregnant. She hadn't given birth yet, so it was a gamble because they didn't know if it was going to be a boy. But he also had a younger brother. So people were suspecting, okay, he's either going to name his brother or he's going to tell us, wait until the kid is born. The legend of Alexander the Great is that his last words were to the strongest. And that's what Maegor says when it comes to who will take Harrenhal. He says to the strongest. And that's when we have the blood melee.
I've got a couple observations here. One is that the first Towers guy, he was serving in Maegor's army. So he's probably committing atrocities along the way. And then, because remember, you don't have to be in Maegor's army. Like, there are rival claimants to the throne, and the faith is also accepting fighting men. So you're choosing to fight to put Maegor on the throne, okay? Then he chose to fight for Harrenhal in the blood-soaked streets of Harroway's town. This is fresh after the massacre that Maegor holds this tournament in the streets, the blood-soaked streets. So, like, just think about this. You're in Maegor's army, and even if you didn't choose to, like, let's just say you're just a soldier, but then you see Maegor come to Harrenhal, kill all these people, execute all these people at Harroway's town. You know that he's doing this because of some scandal with his wife sleeping with someone in King's Landing or something. And now we're massacring people in the Riverlands. And then he's like, and I will give all of the possessions of these genocided people to whoever wins this tourney. And you're like, yeah, I'll fight for that. Those are ill-gotten gains, my friends. Okay?
Yeah.
So you talk about the curse. Here again, it's the character of the person claiming Harrenhal that is a big part of the curse. And then, unfortunately, he named his kid Maegor, or his son named his kid Maegor. And this would have been before Maegor's fall. But yeah, when Lord Maegor Towers' sickly 9-year-old became Lord of Harrenhal, I think in 54 AC, it must have seemed like a bad omen.
Yep. Yeah, because, like you said, so all these knights in Harroway's town have just got done committing atrocities, and then Maegor sets them on one another. And Harroway's town becomes a royal rumble with swords. And everyone's just killing each other for Harrenhal.
Yeah. So, those are, like I said, those are ill-gotten gains. So, 53 AC is when the 9-year-old takes over. And he dies like 8 or 9 years later. Girl Nettles is starting a theory in the chat that Rhaena poisoned him. But I don't know. I think the fact that he's introduced as a sickly child, we're supposed to assume he died young, probably for health reasons. But maybe that just made it easier to poison him. I don't know. So yeah, that's bad karma. And then Rhaena takes care of it for 9 years until we give it to House Strong. So we're 4 for 4, just to go back. 4 for 4 here. Houses that have possessed Harrenhal and gone completely extinct.
Yeah. Oh, I would say Maegor Towers, being a sickly kid, it's a Sweet Robin parallel. Sweet Robin's real name is Robert, so this sickly little kid who's set up to be the lord of this.
Named after a king. Robin, Robert, Meg. Okay.
Named after a bad king.
Right. Yeah, and he's being poisoned with sweet sleep. That is true. That is true. Hooked on drugs. So yeah, House Whore, House Qoherys, House Harroway, House Towers. No more! Gone! Away with you! Fatality. So, now we are on. So I did have some Rhaena Targaryen here. And this is this is Harrenhal by Elegant Water. Very spooky Harrenhal here. And then, and actually if I slide this one over, I can show you the Godswood, I think. Yeah, see, they splashed the Godswood over there on the side, so that's cool. Yeah, this is Rhaena Targaryen, the Queen in the East by Hazem Amin. And I will just say that this is either the wrong color for Dreamfire or the artist is just putting everything in sunset tones. I guess Dreamfire is like light blue and pink, right? Pink membranes and light blue scales. So
yeah,
maybe the sunset coloring is taking over, or maybe the artist drew this before Dreamfire was described. I don't know, but it's a cool ass picture, so whatever. That is her with it looks like she's labeled the queen in the east, so I'm guessing that's meant to be House Farman's castle.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, because Farmans are a Westerland house, so that would be west.
Oh,
Harrenhal.
yeah. She's supposed to be the queen in the west, isn't she? Not the queen in the east.
She has both titles at some. There's a time.
Oh, you're right. So this would be Dragonstone then, I guess. Yeah. Okay. You're right.
Yeah. So for Rhaena, so this becomes like a question. It's something I actually thought of with Qoherys and why Qoherys had the feelings he did about women when it came to women rulers. And I think I came to the conclusion of, I think it was his relationship with his older sister that caused him to like look skeptically at women because of Rhaena. Now, not for nothing, Rhaena went through a lot, but I think it is like this constant back and forth, this sibling rivalry between older sister and younger brother that shaped Qoherys' outlook on women rulers. I know there's a lot of Soprano fans, so I made the connection of like, it's like Qoherys is trying to run things like Tony Soprano, and there's Rhaena as just this goddamn Janice. So Qoherys is probably looking at it like, okay, fine, you can have Dragonstone, you can have Harrenhal, whatever's going to get you to shut up so that I can do my job and rule the kingdom.
We see that a couple times when he and Alysanne argue about who the heir should be, and Qoherys never picks he passes over, women a couple times. So
I see Rhaena having a hand in that, on why he had that outlook.
That could be. You're definitely not wrong about Rhaena being like more independently minded and stuff like that, and about having a rivalry with Qoherys. That I have definitely picked up on that. Mm-hmm. So this one here is by Kieran Yanner again, and these are the Black Brides. So this is Rhaena, Jane Westerling, and Eleanor Costain. So I love this. This is probably my favorite picture of Rhaena. It's a really good portrait. The posture, the outfit. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Yeah, Qoherys isn't a bad king. It's the whole thing with Qoherys is that he's presented as unambiguously good, and then George is just giving us a little like, not perfect, And then the other interesting thing is that, actually a lot of the best stuff that happened was because of the influence of Alysanne. So, yeah, if Qoherys is good, Alysanne is great. And I think that's kind of the story that George is telling, is be like, yeah, some of Qoherys, what he did, he got credit for Alysanne's ideas. And then, is the chat behind? Let me just give it a little refresh.
Chat's in there saying Janice did nothing. Okay, I know all these Soprano fans. Like, no. Rhaena lets the dragon eggs get stolen. Janice steals the leg from the woman with Russian mob connections. Rhaena is Qoherys' Janice, and I'm sticking to that.
I don't know. Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah, if you watch The Sopranos, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I know a lot of chat watches Sopranos, so they're getting what I'm laying down.
Well, Girl Nettles sounds like she wants to have a debate with you on her channel about it. So maybe you guys can get into that. Hey, good girl. How are you doing, girl? Girl Nettles, Cleo says hi. From one queen to another. Isn't that right, girl? Okay. So it's time for... these guys. How strong? Yay. Let me move this slide up here real quick. Yeah, so before we talk about these fine fellows. Oh, man. Did Laurie's face get covered up by the sigil accidentally? Oops. Sorry, Laurie's. Sorry. There you are, you flower-sniffing creep. Anyway, we'll get to him in a second. House Strong. There's some history with House Strong before we get to the day of House of the Dragon. Because, of course, if we'll go back to the timeline, House Strong is given Harrenhal in 73. And the dance, The Great Council is 101. That's when the show starts. And the war is happening in 129. So we're 60 years before that. We're in 73 AC. And this is the story of Lord Bywin Strong and Lord Lucamore the Lusty. So Bywin Strong, he is, first of all, named the first Lord Strong of Harrenhal. And the Strongs are an ancient first man house, supposedly, from somewhere in the Riverlands. But we're never, just like Harroways, we don't know where they come from. It's not said. And there's no clues either. Unless you want to look at the colors and be like, well, they must have lived near House Massey, who has the triple spiral in red, green, and blue. But obviously the red, green, and blue, those are the colors of the Trident Forks. So somewhere around the Trident, one would assume, but I don't think there's any clues. Is there, Tim?
No, I would just say, based on the colors, presumably they live somewhere in the Trident, maybe around the center, and that's why they take all three colors.
That would be a logical assumption. Or at one point they ruled the lands of all three branches, perhaps. So they are given in 73 AC. Let me go back to my other slide.
I mean, the thing about these ancient houses and these petty kings, and there being hundreds, if not thousands of them, is that anyone could claim to have been a king at one point. But the big thing for House Strong is Lucamore early on. So he wins. There's a tourney at the after it's celebrating the completion of the Dragon Pit.
Yes.
Lucamore Strong wins the Grand Melee. So that's where he distinguishes himself.
And that's back in 56 AC. So this is fully like 15, 16 years before House Strong is given to Lord Bywin. His brother, Lucamore, makes the Kingsguard after he wins this tourney. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was the same. So it starts. Lucamore makes an impression by winning the Grand Melee at the Dragon Pit, and as soon he is named to the Kingsguard as soon as a position opens up. So again, it's just somebody who came out of nowhere, but showed themselves to be strong, distinguished themselves, and so they are rewarded. Lucamore gets the Kingsguard position, and then somewhere along the line, years down the line, his brother Bywin will be awarded Harrenhal.
Now, the year after Bywin is awarded Harrenhal in 73 AC, or later that year, someone finds out or blurts out that turns out Sir Lucamore, well, he shouldn't have been a Kingsguard. Yeah, that was the wrong vocation in life for him. He just wants to make babies, turns out. He should have been a Mormon or something, because he has 3 women that he has kids with. He married them all in secret, kept them secret from each other, and had 16 children with these 3 women. And he did this all while serving as Knight of the Kingsguard. So he must have had Peter Baelish's teleporter. I don't know. Maybe that came from Harrenhal. I don't know how he did that. I've no effing clue. But somehow this guy, Lucamore the Lusty, I mean, he was running a game on everyone.
Yeah, he's pulling off a better Fred Flintstone by being in 3 places at once. There's that classic Flintstones episode where Fred needs to be at the Water Buffalo Lounge and at his daughter's birthday, and he keeps running back and forth. So I think
the whole thing is a rom-com. It's a comedy. He's just like, okay, I'll be right back. Hold on, and he's just dashing to the other event.
It's that gag. It's that gag. Yeah. But then poor Bywin too, because this happens.
It's funny.
This comes out in the same year that Bywin is awarded Harrenhal. So you can think of Bywin looking at his brother like, dude, I just got this. What are you doing?
Yeah, and it could have even been there's a political machination here, somebody trying to, take the Strongs down a peg because they've just been elevated, or an enemy of theirs, exposing the secret that everyone's known about, or maybe George will give us the whole story one day, but all we know is that Lucamore was discovered. He was gelded and sent to the wall. So a little bit of a Gargan, the guest, echo. And Lucamore, he's sent to the wall. Now, his 3 wives and their various children King Qoherys, I guess it would be, he gives his first wife and kids into the care of his brother, Lord Bywin, at Harrenhal. And the other 2 wives are given to other trusted lords. I think one of them goes to Storm's End or something.
Yeah, they go to the Stormlands and the Vale.
And so all the kids are forbidden, Cleo, from using the name Strong. So they took bastard names, Rivers or where they're from, instead. So we've got these strong bastards here at Harrenhal, but we've also got Bywin Strong in the official line of Strong. And then in 105, it passes to Lord Lionel from House of the Dragon. And that's pretty much the next thing we know. So did you have any more thoughts on Lucamore?
Just that, like, so the kids go off. Qoherys doesn't see fault with the children or the wives. That's why he doesn't punish them. Yeah, they go off. They become River, Storm, and Stone in their respective new kingdoms. And this is what lays down the line of, like, these little stronglings being all over the place. Why is Robert Baratheon and the Storm Kings, like, why are they so big and gruff? Well, there were Strongs in the Stormlands. Same with, like, the Royces and all these other times where you see, like, all these big families come out of nowhere in these kingdoms, and then you remember, oh yeah, there were some Strongs there. And then that leads us to the idea of, is Dunk, who might be a Strong, is he a descendant of Lucamore the Lusty through these bastard children of his that were all sent off in different directions?
Yeah, I would love it if we get more clues to draw that link. But that definitely seems possible. Because, yeah, there's 16 of these kids out here. And they can't use the name Strong, but they're in different places and they're having kids. So, yeah, it is an interesting line of research. So, yeah, Alys Rivers definitely could be one of Lucamore's children or grandchildren. And so she is said to be the bastard of Lord Lionel, who takes over in 105, which would mean that she's pretty old, Cleo. Older than, her. And that's what's said. Like, we don't know how old she is because she's a witch. So maybe she's 40, maybe she's 60. Maybe she's, who knows? It's that kind of thing. So, yeah, we'll come back to Alys. But, yes, very possible that she's not Lionel's bastard, but instead from the line of Lucamore. That would make sense to me. The infernal, the cursed Lucifer line. So yeah, 105, Lionel takes over, and we see in House of the Dragon, he's serving his hand eventually to King Viserys. He's father to Harwin and Larys, the foot fetish powered flower sniffer guy. And he also has an uncle, Simon Strong. Lionel does. And Simon Strong is in charge of Harrenhal right now. He's been cast. We'll see him on season 2. He's old, very old, older than Lionel. And he's got to be like 80 or something. And he's in charge of Harrenhal. So we've already seen Larys kill the rest of his family in a fire. And in Fire and Blood, we don't know if Larys did it, but that is what happened. They die in a fire around that time after they're sent away from King's Landing for the same reasons. It's very similar. So that is one of the potential rumors. What are the other rumors about the fire at Harrenhal, Tim?
I'm not sure. Like, because I think the big one is that Larys Strong is the one who started it, if not, or at least the way we saw on the show, had some kind of schemers, some mooks and henchmen of his do it for him.
So Daemon is a rumor for everything. The other rumor is that Viserys did it to silence any, accusations that Harwin is the father of Rhaenyra's children. Another idea is that Larys did this on behalf of Viserys in the way that he serves Alicent. Like, oh, did you want your father back in King's Landing? I figured out a way to do that for you. Oh, not like that. Oh, well, this is how I do things.
Oh, yeah.
The flowers. Okay, so...
Yeah, now that is jogging my memory, but I guess I always felt deep in my heart that Larys did it, and then so the show deciding to go down that route like really cements it.
I think that makes the most sense. He is very hard to explain if you don't go with the theory that like he's a power-hungry psychopath or sociopath. So yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, who has the most to gain? Larys Strong, obviously. He's the second son.
And so just real quick, again, this is, I'll give spoiler warnings for House of the Dragon. Girl Nettles is asking how many Harrenhal tragedies were orchestrated by people like Larys, and how many tragedies were magic. I think we've not seen magic at Harrenhal yet. Yeah, so this is, you could definitely make that argument. And I think George wants to at least show us that, like, yeah, there could be magic here, but think first about behavior. And that's what I tried to highlight in my essay and in kind of our conversation that we're having here. It's mostly because George doesn't use magic to remove people's agency. So you're not going to see innocent, sweet people go live at Harrenhal and then their lives go bad a bunch. That's not very interesting. You know, when George, so I said in the Harrenhal, the first one, George likes to do horror writing. He clearly does. Harrenhal, he does a lot of horror stories here. And when George wants to create a haunted castle full of horror stories, where does he go to generate that? He thinks of people like Black Heron and Larys and Aegon the Unworthy and, Tiana of the Tower and Maegor the Cruel. These are the type of people that manufacture horror. So it's, George has said, like, who are the real monsters, right? The darkness inside of people. And so that's kind of the real curse here, is the grasping nature, the cruelty, the hubris, all that stuff. So yeah, I think you're right on the money, Girl Nettles.
Yeah. Oh, I want to correct something. So I said that the Lucamore's kids went to the Vale. I was wrong. No, the third place that they went to was actually the Crown Lands, and Dunk is from Flea Bottom. He's from King's Landing. So yeah, it's definitely the dots are there for us to connect.
He's the 17th son of, no, he's the 16th son of a 16th son, or something like that. That would be funny if he's like eggs, because Egg is the fourth son of a fourth son, so yeah. Dunk is squared. Anyway, again, getting into spoilers territory and flipping ahead a couple slides here. Oh, yes. Like I said, Lucerys, Jacaerys, and Joffrey, they are also strongs. Just don't call them that at dinner. It's not polite. But yes, the seed is strong. So these are strongs. Again, spoiler alert, but not many people survive through the war. Like, none of the people in this picture live to ripe old ages. Almost no one in this story does. Well, I guess if you scoot the picture over and include Rhaena, she's there. Where is she? Maybe she's cut off. Oh, that was the wrong slide. There you go. Mm-hmm. Hi, Rhaena. You might have a future. These folks, no, I don't know about this maid. She probably dies too. Okay? So I don't know if that's meant to be the curse of Harrenhal, or if that's more to do with, like, the Iron Throne, cutting Rhaenyra, not true-born children. I don't know. I think it's mostly about it. Using your kids in the Game of Thrones gets them dead. Okay? Mm-hmm. But in any case, I just thought I would mention they are strongs. They do not survive. And now we get to Atrocity Land. We've seen from the previous, there's going to be... the next section will be season 2 spoilers, Abigail. So you could find something to do for 15 minutes and come back, I guess. But yeah, there's going to be some spoilers. We don't know how much Alys Rivers they're going to do on the show. If they're smart, they'll do a bunch of Alys Rivers, but we'll see. So yeah, here's Aemond One Eye. This artwork is by Diego Gisbert Lorenz. And he commits some atrocities, much in the following in the footsteps of Maegor, right? So what happens here?
Yeah, so initially what we get is when the war starts, we saw on the show Daemon's making his war plans. Daemon Targaryen will take Harrenhal. He needs a foothold in the Riverlands. Harrenhal seems like a good spot. Simon, who we've talked about as a very old man, basically gives it up without a fight. And it's after this time that we start to see like more of the cracks in Daemon and Rhaenyra's relationship when they become more estranged, and Daemon pretty much just stays at Harrenhal from this point, waiting. It's just waiting for the day that Aemond will come, and Aemond will begin. When exactly does Aemond get with Alys Rivers? Because Daemon has to leave it at some point for him to. I think I'm getting my timeline mixed up. When does Daemon leave Harrenhal for Aemon to meet up with Alys Rivers?
They're coming and going a couple times. It's not really important, to be honest, for telling the story of what we're trying to do, which is the horrors of Harrenhal, and it's more spoilery if we figure out. So it doesn't matter. They both spend some time there. When Aemond is there, it's one of the earlier events, and he essentially puts to death all of the Strongs. And the thing is that Daemon goes there first, and Simon Strong surrenders the castle to Daemon.
Yeah.
And then after Daemon leaves, Aemon shows up and he says, "You were way too quick to surrender the castle." And so what Aemon does is he makes Simon Strong fight a duel with Aemon. And the guy's like 80. So of course, Aemon kills him easily, and then he sets out killing every single Strong he can find, except for Alys Harroway. So,
Alys Rivers,
sorry. Real quick, people are asking about the origins of Strong. They're pointing out the Stark is German for Strong. So, is there a connection? I don't know. I've heard that before, but that's the only clue about that. I don't think there are any clues that lead us to the north with how strong. Somebody let me know. But the colors are the river of the Trident, so I tend to think they're rooted in the Riverlands. So yeah, there's atrocities. Aemon commits atrocities. He kills all these Strongs, and except for Alys Rivers, who is a supposed bastard daughter of Lord Lionel, and definitely a witch. And we'll talk about this in a second. Let's talk about Aemond and Alys. Yeah, he takes Alys for his paramour. That's essentially the first thing that happens. And this art is by Alexandra Skiba. And this one is by IRL Plastic Lamb. And they have cast a very good actor to play Alys Rivers. So they will probably be playing this up. This will be a whole plot line. Could it be a snow-covered field, the white field of House Strong? I don't know. Dating back to the Long Night? Maybe. I mean, it's a decent idea, but I don't know of anything to sort of corroborate it. But yeah, this Aemond Alys thing is going to be a big thing. They're going to have fun with it. Alys Rivers is a witch. May we burn her? No, you may not.
Oh, all this artwork is looking familiar.
And this is by Bluer Bell here. And this one is by Liani Lee. Have you seen that one?
That one I have not seen, but the other two, the last three are all in the House of Lothston.
Yeah, this is probably the best known one. It's really good. So then, of course, there's also the dragon fight at Harrenhal. Aemond and Aegon have a showdown in the yard. This artwork here makes it look like Daemon and Aemond are a little swapped. Like, Aemond looks like the older and taller one here. Actually, I don't know who's supposed to be taller. But,
he looks like M. Bison in Street Fighter.
It does look like M. Bison. That's what it is. So,
yes!
Aemond One Eye, M. Bison. And pregnant Alys. There's Caraxes. They're getting ready to fight the duel, which they do above the castle. We don't really need to talk about it. It doesn't have much to do, the fight. They both go down in the lake or whatever. But the initial showdown takes place at Harrenhal. And the most interesting thing is that Daemon is waiting for Aemond at Harrenhal for a fortnight, again, 14 days. Yes. And he cuts 13 slashes into the heart tree that still bleed every spring. So I think that is mostly just symbolism about Azor Ahai and the Weirwood Net and all that shit. But do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so so Alice being another one of these witch queen figures, and it's another connection to Visenya. So it's the icy witch queen, someone who, if we believe the story that she will carry Aemon's child, is another woman who is at a very old age, especially in this time, to be getting pregnant. So we're establishing more of these witch queen, icy witch queen figures, especially, and then but this is our first one placed paramountly at Harrenhal.
The actor's name is Gail Rankin, who is playing Alys Rivers. She is very good. From the clips I have seen, she looks like she's going to be a show stealer. So and
also like so these icy witch queens too. The children that they do carry, assuming that Alys Rivers is actually pregnant, because at the end of the dance she'll claim to have a dragon at Harrenhal. Well, Visenya gives birth to Maegor, who said is probably some kind of black magic homunculus experiment. And then the other big connection is to the Knight's Queen, the Corpse Queen, who, if we believe the legends, has children by the Knight's King, but again would be unnatural children. So then whatever child that Aemon supposedly fathers on Alys Rivers, we're going to have to look, if that kid actually makes it. It's one of those unwritten histories. We need Fire and Blood Part 2 in this time where Alys Rivers is the Witch Queen of Harrenhal. What will she give birth to? Will it be a normal human baby, or is there going to be something weird about him?
So, thanks again. We're skipping ahead. Tim. Right to the baby part. Like, so this is Alice. This is Gail Rankin. So she's going to kill. I think this one is Photoshop modified by somebody. But yeah, you can see this one in particular. She's going to do good. She's going to be good. And I'm just playing with you too. I'm sorry. I don't mean to bust your balls like that. But yes. So before, okay, there's a couple things that do happen though. So let's see here. Simon Strong is imprisoned. And then, so Aemon, okay, so they put everyone to death. And it's after the war. So there's a couple interesting things. With the confrontation with Daemon asks Aemon, "How did you find me?" Right? And what does she say?
She saw it in her flames.
Yeah, in a passing cloud and a flames and something else. So she's seeing visions in flames, but also other things. So she's doing sorcery of who knows what kind. And then after the I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. After the war, basically Harrenhal is just deserted. And all these broken men start gathering at Harrenhal under her banner. And nobody knows who is in charge. They just hear that there's this witch queen. And so this goes on for a year or two until Regis Groves of the Kingsguard and Sir Damon Derry march from King's Landing and Castle Derry to Harrenhal with 100 men to reclaim the castle. And that's when Alice meets them atop the walls in defiance, and she has a little boy that she claims, as Tim said, is the son of Aemon, who she claims to have married. So she says this is the true-born son of Aemon, and he is the heir to the Iron Throne. She demands that Sir Regis of the Kingsguard and Sir Damon Derry and the rest of their party kneel to the rightful king of Westeros. Mm-hmm. And Regis answers, I do not kneel to bastards, much less the base-born whelp of a kinslayer and a milk cow. And so then what happens?
And he abruptly dies. His skull bursts, and then there's this back and forth on like what really happened, because obviously the Maesters aren't going to accept that, oh, his skull burst by magic. There are some who say that there was a slinger who threw a rock, like a David and Goliath thing. But somehow, some way, Regis Groves dies from some kind of massive head injury after insulting Alys Rivers.
I do like the Tolosi slinger idea, because the slingshot can make someone's head explode. However, everyone that was there thinks it was sorcery. So if there was a slinger, no one saw them. No one saw the rock. So it's probably sorcery, guys. It's the Maesters that are looking for a non-sorceress explanation. She just lifts a hand and his head pops. So then her men come out, her broken men come out from the gates. They drive off this party. Only 32 men survived to flee to Castle Derry, but the next day, a 33rd man appears. And he's been forced to watch 12 of his fellow captives tortured to death before he was turned loose with a message from Witch Queen Alys. And he says, I'm to tell you what she said, but you can't laugh. The widow put a curse on me. Any man of you laughs, I die. When Sir Daemon assured him that no one was going to laugh, the messenger said, Don't come again unless you mean to bend your knees, she says. Any man who comes near her walls will die. Then there's power in them stones, and the widow's woken it. 7 save us all, she has a dragon. I seen it. So then someone laughs, and he's then strangled to death in the room, and people can see the imprints of a woman's hands, but there's no hands. So Alys remote strangled him or something, and he dies. So what do you make of that? What do you make of both the claim that she has Aemon's son, that she married Aemon, and this claim about her having a dragon? Because maybe Aemon left her with a dragon's egg. That's not impossible. And maybe she hatched it, and she has a little hatchling. Right?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about her having an actual dragon, or if she's talking, or if it's supposed to be more of a symbolic sense with this kid that she presents. Again, jumping ahead a little bit, it said that in the world of Ice and Fire, in the later reign of Aegon III, it said that him and his brother Viserys will have to deal with these pretenders coming forward. It's like black fires before there were black fires. And I've always had this idea, maybe one of these pretenders is this kid at Harrenhal that Alys presents, trying to make a claim. He would be, if he truly is Aemon's son, then he would be a symbolic dragon. But yeah, her having a dragon egg and it actually hatching at Harrenhal, that remains to be seen, because the only clue we have on this is just this one line from this guy. Now, as for him being strangled in the way that he is, it sounds like Shadow Baby. It sounds like he had a shadow assassin hiding within his shadow, like it's attached to him, riding on his back, just waiting for someone to laugh. And that becomes like, that's the cue. Okay, someone laughed. Time to go to work.
They're making Sith jokes now. I find your lack of faith in R'hllor disturbing. That's cool. So I tend to think that if there was a dragon, probably it might have been an illusion that she conjured. That would be easy for her to do. But I do want to say that it's possible Aemon left her with an egg. It's not impossible at all. There's plenty of eggs floating around at this point, and she might have been able to hatch it. So there could be a little hatchling. And as we pointed out, there's 20 years of empty time. So there's a lot of time. Alys Rivers was not removed from Harrenhal when Fire and Blood ends. So she was still there, just like Dany's still on the Dothraki Sea, having
because it is important to say that during not all of the dragons will die during the dance. Most of them will, but not all. We're still left with at least one that we know, which is Mourning. And then somewhere in this 20-year gap, we'll get the last dragon, the one that said, like, was stuntly and deformed, and its head was like the size of an apple, like very small. So maybe Alys does have a hatchling, but maybe it's just these post-dance dragons that we're left with that are all very stunted and they aren't growing and they die early. It could be like that.
Yeah, or there could be, it could die somehow, and there's a whole story that's there that we just haven't heard.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Sheep stealer and cannibal. They also they make it through.
Yep, that's true. That's true. There's those dragons. That would be interesting if one of those was Alice. Oh no, I'm sorry. Not those. Wouldn't be Alice's dragon. I was thinking of. Well, okay. Some people have said that maybe the Fire Witch with the dragon isn't Nettles, but it's actually Alys Rivers and her dragon from here. I do think it's Nettles. But yeah, other than that, I'm not sure like where her dragon would be. So would have been a self-contained story if there is something else there. But it does seem like a pretty interesting character and story to leave hanging. I'm sure George has got something planned in that 20 years of empty time. So
yeah.
Then let's see here. So Larry Strong, Cleo, come here, girl. He doesn't have any kids. He thinks that kids are an inconvenience. So unless he could figure out how to get Allison's feet pregnant, then he's not going to have any kids. So I don't think he's a green seer, so he can't live forever. And I don't know if they let root-bound, half-digested corpse wizards be the lords of castles anyway, so I won't necessarily ruin Larys' ending, but he does not survive the dance, and he does not have kids. And thus perishes the line of Strong, except for all of Lucamore's bastards and maybe Alice's son and who knows, whoever else. But there's no more official Strongs. Until Sir Robert Strong shows up to carry Cersei back to the Red Keep after the Walk of Shame. And so I did want to take a moment to point this out. Like, this is why it's so absurd for Cersei to claim that this is Robert Strong. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, this giant knight called Strong, very famous name, that's been extinct for 150 years. It's just like, no, that's not Robert Strong. Okay, yeah. Cersei.
Yeah, that's like, it's the same connection as guys in the Golden Company claiming to be Lothstons and Muds and all these other extinct houses.
No, he's not confirmed to be a Green Seer. Good Lord. That's a bad theory, in my opinion. It's a very bad theory.
Yeah, unless we get if House of the Dragon wants to go that route, unless we get a scene of him, eyes, whites of his eyes in the back of his head, like Bran, I'm not going to accept it.
Yeah, he's just someone who gathers intelligence and uses informants and has no moral code. Like those people are out there. Anyways, and he's also, we've seen like how he operates. He uses people. Like that's how he gains leverage, not with magic. Like he manipulates people.
Oh, yeah, okay, so yeah, there are Strongs in the Golden Company. Yep, there are guys claiming to be Strongs there too.
So House Lothston, it's time. Time to tell the story of Felaena Stokeworth and Aegon IV. So here's how this starts. In 151, the king is Aegon III, and he's got his younger brother Viserys, who is either I think he's Hand of the King, right?
I believe he would be Hand by now, yeah.
And so Viserys convinces Aegon III to award Harrenhal to Sir Lucas Lothston, who's been the faithful and well-respected castellan of the Red Keep since 136 AC. He trained both Aegon III and Viserys. So this is somebody that's almost like an uncle to them. Respected master-at-arms. Not castellan, sorry. Master-at-arms. That's who trains people. So Viserys is actually cleaning up two messes here by putting Lucas Lothston in charge of Harrenhal. He's cleaning up the Harrenhal mess, but also his son, Aegon, who would one day become Aegon IV, a.k.a. Aegon the Unworthy, had had his first scandal. And so at age 14, and this is Aegon much older here on the right, but when he was only 14, he was caught abed with the 24-year-old and presumably very hot Felina Stokeworth. I just love to make that joke about her for whatever reason, but just the name Felina. Like I think George was trying to make a hot girl name. I think that's what that is. But interesting thing about Felina, she was part of the Maiden's Day Ball held in 133 to find a future wife for Aegon III when he was 13. So a lot of people brought their daughters to this thing. She was one of them. She was only 9, and she was not chosen. There's a whole story behind that, which we're not going to get into, Tim. But the point is, she was almost queen, and then wasn't. And then here, all these years later, 15 years later, when she's 24, she is caught sleeping with the 14-year-old Aegon the Unworthy. And so you can really see this both ways here. This is an interesting one for agency and age. It could be that Aegon the Unworthy, even though he's only 14, he is an entitled prince, and he has tons of mistresses and takes advantage of women his whole life. So even though Felina is 24, this could still be coercion. This could be Aegon using his royal privilege, cornering her somewhere, and forcing her, coercing, again, threatening. It could be like that. It could be completely backwards. It could be that Felina has held on to the dream of being queen these past 15 years since she came so close, and she sees an unmarried Targaryen prince who's young and impressionable, and she sleeps with him. Maybe his first, and she's trying to climb her way back to power. This is somebody who could become king, or, at least hand of the king, or is a prince. So it could be that. It could be either one. Or maybe it was love. Maybe they just fell in love despite the age gap. So what do you think, Tim?
I go with the second option, because the line is that when they were found abed, she was making him a man. And so in this sense, that would mean this is him losing his virginity. So the idea of an adult woman sleeping with a teenage boy, this is making commentary on the other form of sexual abuse that doesn't get talked about as often and doesn't get taken as seriously, which is when the abuser is an older woman and the victim is a younger male. We see this a lot. Like we get a lot of these scandals. Usually, it's always like a teacher seducing one of her students,
right.
Like that.
Right.
We get those stories a lot, and I think that's George playing with that aspect. So then it becomes the idea that Aegon IV, who we know is an abusive, brutal king later in life, but if he starts as a victim, it's the abused becoming the abuser later in life. That's the trajectory he'll take.
Yeah. I think that is the story he's telling, that it is like one of those things with the older person.
I think of like that South Park episode of like Ike and his teacher, and the police are just like, nice. And then Kyle has to point out, like, no, he's a victim. She's taking advantage of him. It's never taken as seriously when it's a young boy and an older woman. People have this idea of, oh, he must have been great. He must have been a lucky kid. Where were these teachers when I was young? Like tends to be the prevailing mindset about it.
Right. And so in a modern legal sense, we have the term for that, statutory rape. So it's basically, there's a distinction drawn between the kind of, R word, where it's the more typical thing. One person doesn't want it and the other person uses force, okay? With statutory, the idea is that someone below the age of 18 can't legally consent, right? Especially not with an adult who's older. If you have two 15-year-olds sleeping with each other, no one goes to jail, right? But when you have legal adults sleeping with teenagers, we as a society have said that is a consent issue, and rightfully so. Obviously, that is to protect teenagers and also children. So it's a little bit gray area here only because we know that Aegon goes on to abuse of a bunch of other women. So that is what introduces the gray area. But yeah, we should be clear that for the most part, this does seem to be written as a predatory thing from Felena's part. And you can see the motivation there because she was almost queen. And then later, well, let's tell the rest of the story, and that will color our interpretation of this as well. Oh, go ahead.
From the perspective of the Maiden Day Ball, like that means hundreds of girls were almost queen. Aegon the Third just didn't give him a second look because he didn't care. But yes, but with Aegon the Fourth, he's a 14-year-old kid, hormones raging, and a woman, and a woman, a presumably very attractive one, has just given him the go-ahead. I could see it's like, look, he's a kid. This is his first time. He let his dick do the thinking and lead the way. That's how I read this point with Felaena Stokeworth.
I think so.
The scandal is that they're caught. That's the big thing. They're caught. And so Viserys now has to deal with this of like, okay, my son, this prince, is involved in this. I gotta clean this up, and that's why when I talked about it in my House Lothston video, this making Lucas Lothston the Lord of Harrenhal goes with marrying Felaena Stokeworth. She's quickly married off to them, and I've looked at it as like this. I've looked at it as a backroom deal. Like, hey, take my kid's side piece and raise whatever bastard he might have gotten her with, because Felaena Stokeworth's child is rumored to be Aegon the Unworthy's kid, and I will make you a lord. I will give you the biggest castle. That seems to be the deal. Like, you do this favor for me, and I'll do this favor for you. Harrenhal, again, is a bargaining chip.
Right, and so basically what Aegon and Viserys are trying to do is they're like, well, Harrenhal has been just right. It's been open, right? Like no one's occupied it. We got to do something with it, and we've got this scandal now. And so somebody has the idea. We don't know if Lucas was asking for it or what happened, but essentially they marry Felaena to Lucas and give them Harrenhal, and so they go to live at Harrenhal. And they have a kid, but it's years later. They have a kid named, what's her name? Jane. So she's Jane Lothston, and her mother is Stokeworth, Felaena. There are still rumors, though, that Jane's father is actually Aegon the Unworthy. So it must have been the case that Lucas Lothston and Jane Stokeworth, and Felaena Stokeworth Lothston, they must have been visiting King's Landing on occasion in order for there to be those rumors. Like sometime around the time when she would have had to get pregnant with Jane, they must have visited court. So even though they've gone to live at Harrenhal, it's not that far, and we can assume that they are still connected to King's Landing.
Or the other option is that Aegon's the one visiting. Now, Aegon the Third, the Fire and Blood ends with him kicking out kicking out his small council and saying, "I'm not going to do a royal procession." But here's the thing: if Aegon the Third is not going to do these royal processions, it's possible that other members were doing the processions in his stead. Send out like, okay, fine, the king's not going to do it. Well, we still got to make ourselves aware. So I could see them like Viserys being like, all right, fine, if you're not going to go make the processions like every other king before you, I guess I'm going to have to do it, or my kid's going to have to do it. I could see him sending Aegon out, this is the king's nephew, as like, okay, go visit everybody. And then that's when Aegon the Fourth, if he's the one sent out as like an envoy, that's when he begins sowing his wild seeds.
But you wouldn't send him. You wouldn't send him to Harrenhal where Felaena is, though, because they were caught in bed together, and you were trying to clean up that scandal. So yeah, that's why I assume they must have visited King's Landing. That would make more sense. But
it's possible in his Riverlands time, him sneaking off and having dalliances, because he definitely somehow he ingratiates himself with the Blackwoods and the Brackens to get us those bastards.
That's true. That's true. Okay, you make a good point. So somehow those rumors are started, and maybe those rumors are just pure scandalous innuendo, but they exist. So here's the next thing that happens. In 164, they give birth to Jane Lothston. Then 8 years later, and she's raised at Harrenhal. And then in 172, Aegon the Unworthy ascends the Iron Throne. Okay. Aegon, and he becomes Aegon the Fourth. He might have poisoned his father, Viserys, who was just taking a little too long to die, Tim. Let's be honest. It's very inconvenient. So, come on, move it or lose it, buddy. And so he becomes king. 6 years after he becomes king, in 178, Lucas and Felaena move to court in King's Landing. So again, probably visiting before then. Then they actually move to court. So this is interesting. They bring their 14-year-old interesting might be the wrong word. Horrific. They bring their 14-year-old Jane with them to court. Aegon the Unworthy is 43 at this time. He takes Jane as his 8th mistress. And remember, Jane's mother, Felaena, was his first mistress. So he is dating his ex-girlfriend's daughter. And we are supposed to understand that that's gross and that he's gross and that, okay, the point is made.
Yeah.
So he takes her as his mistress. And then the extra rumor is that Mom, Felaena, is joining in the love play with her daughter and with Aegon the Unworthy. So that probably did happen. But again, we have this question. Are the Stokeworths victims here? Did they come to court and then Aegon, claims the daughter, forces the mom to be re-traumatized, or whatever, and he makes Lucas Lothston Hand of the King to sort of enable all this. But it's more likely, and based on what Tim was saying earlier, if Felaena was trying to climb to power before by sleeping with Aegon, then this is probably just as disgusting as this looks. This is probably Lucas and Felaena doing exactly what everyone else did to get favors from Aegon the Unworthy, which is offer up their daughters. And this happened 2 other times, didn't it, Tim?
Yeah, because the Brackens do the same thing. His 5th and his 7th mistress are both Brackens. It is the little sister of his 7th mistress is the younger sister of his 5th mistress. Her and her father groom her younger sister specifically to catch the eye of Aegon the Fourth so that they can win their way back into court. So the idea of the Stokeworths and the Lothstons doing the exact same thing, especially at this point when Aegon has made it very apparent that you can buy him with sex. Yeah, they're doing the same thing that the Brackens did.
And also the Butterwells.
And the Butterwells, yeah. Three maiden daughters, and then Lord Butterwell gets a dragon egg. Yeah.
So the precedent is there. This is how you get favors from Aegon. You give him carnal pleasures, mostly women, and he'll give you dragon's eggs or name you Hand of the King. So this is, again, Aegon and Maegor, 2 very different kinds of bad king. Aegon the Unworthy is corruption incarnate. He is all about the deadly sins like greed, lust. He's venal, he's corrupt. He's not even gaining political advantage. He's giving away political advantage. He's thinking with his you-know-what, as Tim said. We don't need to say it again, Tim, but you're right. Maegor is different. He's driven by rage and ambition and desire to dominate and all this other stuff. So 2 different bad kings here. So what happens within a year, Aegon the Unworthy gives poor young Jane, who's probably the victim here, okay, unless she's just cut in the cloth of her mom and she's all about climbing for power too. But she's 14. So again, this is back to the, like, how much can you really blame a 14-year-old for her choices? Like, no, this is on the parents. So poor Jane, she's given a pox by Aegon the Unworthy, some sort of STD. And then Aegon the Unworthy dismisses all the Lothstons, sends them back to Harrenhal. So Lucas is no longer Hand of the King. Both mistresses are dismissed. But because he's not Maegor, he doesn't fly to Harrenhal and kill all the Lothstons. They're just outcast. So, what do you make of that last bit?
Yeah, so that is Aegon, like, again, it's his fault. He's the one who gives her the pox, yet he views her as dirty and sends her away, fires her father, sends the Lothstons back. Now, they got lucky in that sense that he didn't murder them on top of it, go full Maegor. As for the corruption, yeah, like I brought up Henry VIII earlier, and people in chat said, like, a fantasy writer can do a lot with Henry VIII. Because you can. George basically took Henry VIII and broke him into two people to give, and just used different aspects of his cruelty. Maegor and Aegon. They form like this full whole of this real life person who did all of these things and more. So yeah, and then Aegon, for his part, he just moves on to the next shiny thing where he'll take his ninth mistress, and then for him it's business as usual. Like, okay, well, I'll just wait for someone else to offer up I'll just wait for the next guy to offer up their daughter on a silver platter, and then I'll give him. Maybe he'll be Hand of the King. I don't know. I don't care. I'm Aegon. Where's my food? Like that's his thinking right now.
Yeah, that's Chad is asking if we know what happened to Jane. We don't. I don't think we do. They're pretty much they're just out of the story at that point. That's essentially the rise and fall of the Lothstons.
The next time, because it's not until it becomes another one of these blank slates, because then in the in-between, after Aegon dies and Daeron takes over, the next time we hear about Lothstons will be in the Dunk and Egg stories, the Sworn Sword, which, yeah, I'm jumping ahead.
So this is my jump ahead to conclusions, Matt. It's got different conclusions, and you jump to them. Shout out Office Space. If you don't know Office Space because you're young, go watch that. That's one of the old people 90s movies you should watch. Not all of them are good. That one's good. So, yeah, so the point I wanted to make was just to button up this conversation was like, we have to go back and look at Lucas now. If he really was on board with offering his daughter up to Aegon the Unworthy in exchange for the most powerful promotion in the land, Hand of the King, then we have to look at him getting Harrenhal to begin with and say, was he haranguing Viserys for that damn castle for years? Probably. He was probably asking for it. And so when the opportunity came, he's like, fine, I'll give it to friggin' Lucas, old Lucas. He'd been asking me for it. He'll marry the hot wife, he'll marry the hot girl and make her his wife and take care of all this for her. Fine, he wants it. The point is, he might be an ambitious character too when you look back on it. And so now you have Jane and Lucas, both potentially ambitious people. They get a promotion to Harrenhal, but it's like not good enough for either one of them. I think that is the story here. And so they do this really disgusting thing of selling their daughter to this disgusting king. And so once again, it's like what's the curse of Harrenhal? Ambition, hubris, pride, lack of scruples, all the same stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing with Lucas
Lothston
getting Harrenhal is that maybe he was haranguing them, or maybe there's always a sort of like power corrupts. He might have started off as good, just a master of arms. But the other thing is to keep in mind is when Lucas Lothston is master at arms, the bar had been set really low by the previous master at arms, which is a guy named Gareth Long. That was the one who made Gaiman Palehair Aegon III's. That's the last master at arms we know of. He's the one who made Gaiman Palehair Aegon III's whipping boy. And then Aegon basically was like begrudgingly follows his studies just so that Gaiman won't get beat for his mistakes, because Aegon III is an empathetic kid. It's makes him my favorite Targaryen. But so when Lucas Lothston becomes the Master at Arms after someone like Gareth Long, it doesn't take much for him to be seen as someone better and someone and if the bar is set that low, maybe Aegon III looked at Lucas and said, you know what, you deserve, I'm going to give you something just because you're not a complete jackass. So, and then over time, as he's Lord of Harrenhal, the years of that just set in. And that could be another curse of Harrenhal. If a presumably good guy is gifted it, and then after years and years of being the Lord, the corruption sets in. Because Lothstons have it for a pretty good run. They have it for 151 and 2. They have
do.
It for
they
70
do.
years.
And Girl Nettles is saying she's claiming that Aegon is not disgusting yet. Yeah, he's 39 at this point, so he's only 10 years away from dying. So I think he's probably getting pretty disgusting at this point. It's not the very end, but I think he's out of his Chad phase, Girl Nettles.
But Lucas himself, if given the timeline, 151. So at this point, Lucas has been Lord of Harrenhal for over 20 years at this point. No one's had this long of a run. So if there's another curse aspect of Harrenhal, it could be that. Like this guy, the longer he spends at Harrenhal, making him a worse person.
So then there's a couple other Lothstons that we hear about before we get to Mad Danelle Lothston, who's the big one, obviously. This is weird. The wiki is confused here. There's a couple mentions of Lothstons, but we don't know who they are. So there's another Lord Lucas and his son Manfred, who are renowned for their black deeds. But we don't know if that's the same Lucas. Now, if Lucas did sell his daughter to Aegon the Unworthy and she came back with a pox, then maybe that's the black deeds. Or a different Lucas named after that. Or what were you going to say?
Well, that Lord Lucas is also called the Pander. And that's exactly what Lucas Lothston was doing. He pandered his daughter to Aegon IV to get the role of Hand of the King. So could be the same, might be a second Lucas, but the Pander is a title that we could apply to this Lord Lucas. But yeah, but then the next one would be his son, Manfred of the Black Hood. And that gives us more of this like Banefort Grim Reaper imagery with that guy.
Yeah, and there was a Manfred.
Manfred. There's Manfred and Manfred.
I think it's just the E and the Y that are swapped.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But that could just be a spelling mistake. Like that could be a George changing the horse eye color thing. So Manfred Lothston, that's the one that Eustace Osgrey talks about, who was for Daemon Blackfyre before turning against him. So we don't know. That could be the same Manfred, and that could be the Black Deeds, or it could be a different one. They're spelled one letter different. So yeah, we don't know if that's a mistake. This is just like a footnote. It's not anything George has spent a lot of time talking about. But the point is that there were other Lothstons renowned for their black deeds, and the only other little bits we hear are also bad. This guy that turned his back on Daemon Blackfyre, and Lucas maybe selling his daughter to Aegon the Unworthy. And I wasn't age shaming him by saying he's 39. I'm older than 39. Come on. I was just saying he's most of the way through his life. And if he's an indulgent guy and he got overweight, like, he's very corrupt. He's been indulging in the flesh, every carnal desire his whole life. So by 39, he's probably not looking as good as me. Like I work out, I walk, I don't abuse alcohol. I'm not given to indulgences. Yeah. So, and I work a job that is fulfilling, spending my time with all of you. And this is a good chance for me to say thank you guys for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, click like, all that stuff. But yeah, this is my job, and I do appreciate that you guys make that possible. So in any case, moving along, Danelle Lothston. Take it away, Tim.
Okay, so what we're told is we get to the reign of Mad Danelle, and she shows up at White Walls during the second Blackfyre Rebellion. Now we get the name drop of Manfred in the Sworn Sword, that he proved treacherous. And I'm building on like these tinfoil theories that I built in the Lothston video, is because in the Mystery Night we're given this House Veerwell, right? House Veerwell is attending the tourney at White Walls, and their sigil is a white wyvern on sable. It's like Bloodraven's white dragon on black, just writ small. And it's very much implied that that House Veerwell was acting as Bloodraven's spies. How many eyes?
Strongly implied.
Strongly implied.
Very.
Well, so this idea of that Manfred Lothston proved treacherous, I've theorized that Manfred Lothston might have been one of Bloodraven's spies during the first Blackfire Rebellion. After Aegon dies and Daeron the Good becomes king and he starts doing his house cleaning, the Lothstons, if they're trying to get their way back into court, they're looking at this, okay, well, now we got to go about this by another angle. So when this Blackfire Rebellion starts brewing, if they can make themselves aids and accessories to Daeron the Good, then they have a chance. They're like, okay, he's been painting everyone else that Aegon, that his dad was with broad strokes, but we can make ourselves look better. Maybe if we help this bastard, this royal bastard, this Master of Whispers. And that's something I've theorized of why the Lothstons join up with Bloodraven. And then that's cemented by the second Blackfire Rebellion with Mad Danelle showing up. By this point, the Lothstons are firmly in the court of Daemon the Good, or at the very least, they're cozying up with Bloodraven. Why else would she be among the rebels?
Yeah, for them to be there with Bloodraven means they're connected to Bloodraven. Like, Bloodraven didn't marshal every army in the south that he could. He came with the Royal Targaryen force and a couple other lords.
Yeah, river lords.
Yeah, like he called on the Lothstons to come march with him because he knew that he could count on them. So I think your theory is solid. And at the very least, it checks out where, like, the first Daemon Blackfire, there was a Lothston who was with him and turned against him. And then the second Daemon Blackfire, they're still against him now. So
yeah. So Lothstons probably trying to ingratiate themselves back with the crown by making nice with the new meet the new boss. Like, we got to make nice with the new boss and these guys. So that's how the Bloodraven connection comes in. But then but the stories we get of Mad Danelle is that she's a sorceress. She bathes in blood. That she sends out giant bats to capture children to bring back for her cookpots. It's all of this witch queen, ice queen imagery. But the same thing is also said of Shiera Seastar. We're told that she bathes in the blood to keep herself young. It's George playing with it's Elizabeth Bathory. That's really all it is. It's the Blood Countess. George is doing it with two different women, two different sorceress women bathing in blood and all. Yep, that's the picture. That's the one. That's the Mad Danny I know. That's my Mad Danny.
So this is by Earlbot 2, and this one is by Scrap Chap. And this is the black iron armor that fit her like an iron glove or whatever. And this is Mad Danelle.
Yeah.
So hair flying.
The line I go back to is another line from the Mystery Knight, and it's from that Septon. His hands are scarlet with the blood of... Yeah, so, like, there's this... He drops this line that Prince Mataris, Baelor Breakspear's son, that his children were strangled in the womb, that a shadow came at Bloodraven's command. But now this could be a guy who's just against Bloodraven, but that line, it makes you think of shadow babies. It makes you think of shadow babies. And so if Bloodraven is employing shadow binding magic to trim the Targaryen family tree to get to because I've said many times, a lot of people have to die to get Maegor and Aegon on the throne.
Many people have pointed that out, yes.
Is this where it starts? Well, if Bloodraven's is employing shadow magic, then who's doing it for him? Well, we have two candidates. We have Shiera Seastar, and we have Danelle Lothston, both of whom are said to practice the dark arts.
Oh, man, Tim. Like I said, I don't really mess with fanfic too much, but, like, this sounds like a story right here. Bloodraven and his two witch mistresses. Like, come on, HBO. This is why we need the Blackfire Rebellion era story. It's the best one in the whole history. Really.
And we're talking about precedents being set. Well, if Lucas Lothston is offering up his daughter to Aegon to try and get in, Well, we know that's not going to work with Daeron the Good. Daeron the Good is a whole different kind of person. Seems very, in love with his wife. He seems like the impression we get from Daeron the Good is that guy was probably a one-woman man. But we have all these royal bastards running around. People are placating to Daemon and buttering him up. But then there's these others. So the theory I posed is, what if the Lothstons did the same thing with Mad Danelle and Bloodraven? Like, hey, Danny, why don't you go make nice with this Brynden Rivers guy? Why don't you go make something of that? A redheaded witch queen.
Yeah, I mean it's a strong theory, and it also ties into the idea that Melisandre's mother. I like the Shara Seastar theory, but it could line up with her mother being Danelle Lothston simply just because of the red hair, and
And we talk hinges of the world. Melisandre's the one who gives us that line. She feels more powerful at the wall than she did in Asshai. Would she get the same feeling if she were to go to Harrenhal?
Right. Here's another redheaded witch at a possible power spot. Yeah.
There's definitely in the card.
And we know how it is. George makes parallels. It doesn't mean people are literally connected or the same person always, but sometimes it does. So
it just plays up with the theory, because it's not my theory that Melisandre is the daughter of Bloodraven. But
that's a Yoke Boy theory, yeah.
But if she were, then wouldn't it make more sense? I know genetics in A Song of Ice and Fire is weird, but if you have an albino Targaryen and Shara Seastar, who also has traditional Valyrian features, Melisandre being a redhead and Mad Danelle being a redhead seems to make more sense. Now, of course, we talked about when it comes to glamours. Well, yeah, Melisandre is one of the few we can definitely say is wearing a glamour. But is the hair, would she really be glamoring her? I guess it depends on how important you think glamoring the hair is.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, how burnt is her hair? We don't know. My developed theory on that is that she essentially looks like Maegor underneath, like burnt black, as opposed to old on the show. Because I don't think that she's actually old and frail, and that's covered by the show was actually. Yeah, I think that's what the show showed us. It would make sense if, like, the explanation was, she took off her necklace and that's what was preserving the spell that kept her. No, because she looked in the mirror and saw her true form. But she's really strong. She carries Stannis's battle standard, and she's tall. The battle standard is heavy. It's like a giant flag on a pole. Like, Melisandre carrying that shows you that she's strong. So I don't think she's old and frail. I think her body's just magically transformed, and it would be horrifying to look upon, just like the Shadowbinders wear masks and shit. So,
but as Chad is pointing out, like, didn't realize Mel was normal. Like, she's not normal redhead. She's not a ginger like we would think. She definitely has this more magical blood fire red hair. The thing is that Mad Danelle in that scene in White Walls when she showed up is described in the same way. Her red hair is red. It is blood red.
We don't know how much of that's what I thought we were just saying is that we don't know how much of Mel's appearance is glamour and how much is natural, because her red eyes and white skin, that could be albinism, and then she's just glamored the hair, it could, and that's a connection with Bloodraven. So it's.
I think the more important thing about there being redheads at Harrenhal is the Stark-Tully connection when we get with the next house.
Yeah, so let's keep going with this. Let's cover Danelle's history. We know that... okay, so here's what's said about her. Besides bathing in blood, it's said that she presides over feasts of human flesh, and that on moonless nights she sends out giant bats to abduct children for her cookpots. So it's not really cool to boil children or anybody in cook pots. Shout out to Shogun. But this could just be the sort of tall tales that people in Westeros tell about powerful women or anybody that dabbles in sorcery and the arcane arts and especially women who dabble with sorcery. So once she's opened that door to magic, people are going to say all kinds of stuff. So probably wasn't sending out bats, but you know how George likes to do this. He likes to hide a little bit of truth in the tales. So Feast of Human Flesh, bats. Well, this all sounds like it could be skin changing stuff. Okay. Because we know, well, there could just be weirwood sacrifices in the Godswood. Those could be the Feast of Human Flesh, or there could be weirwood paste eating, which could be cannibalism. Then with all the stuff about bats, that could be skin changing. There could be, you know, you can skin change a bat if you could skin change a bird. A bat might be easier. It's a mammal, to be honest. I don't know, being inside of a bat's head.
Like, and in Bloodraven's cave, it said in the ceiling of the cave are the skeletons of gigantic bats, which is another Bloodraven Lothston connection.
So you can skin change big bats, not just a little teeny flappy ones. Yeah, it's a little annoying ones. So yeah, all of this stuff could be skin changing magic, and if she has a connection to Bloodraven, that makes even more sense. So that was kind of my take on these rumors, is that probably this is giving us skin changer vibes. And then there's where's that quote about Sansa? Oh, that's coming later. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. There's a Sansa quote that parallels, that sounds like it's evoking Mad Danelle, and Sansa is a skin changer. So. Well, I guess I'll just go ahead and skip to it. It's relevant. Let me read it. I have the exact words. The Northern girl, Winterfell's daughter. We heard she killed the king with a spell, and afterward changed into a wolf with big leather wings like a bat, and flew out a tower window. So as you were alluding to, you know, Lady Minisa Tully, Hoster Tully's wife, was originally Minisa Whent. And the Whents are directly connected to the Lothstons, which we'll talk about in a second. So this passage about Sansa, which is just, obviously Sansa didn't turn into a bat, but this is folklore rumor happening in real time, right? And so it's definitely George giving a nod, it seems like, to this heritage from Lothston and Whent. And that could be an additional clue that is a skin changer heritage, and that Danelle was a skin changer.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, real quick, I'll give it back to you, Tim, but I just want to say this could also just be like Martin showing us that in the Riverlands near Harrenhal, people remember Mad Danelle. And so if there's a highborn lady that does something mysterious, like disappearing at a wedding where her husband is murdered, they might make up stories that are influenced on the legend of Mad Danelle. That was the other thing. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's a pretty easy jump from birds to bats, because bats are like mammal versions of birds. They're little flying creatures. And Sansa and all the little bird imagery and being in the Vale with Sweet Rob. And it's pretty set up that that if her skin changer abilities are going to manifest in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be skin changing birds. Like that's definitely the setup. So the thing with Mad Danelle is we don't know exactly when she goes down, but it's said that all this black magic and sorcery and all these other rumors, she invites chaos and causes the downfall of her line. And it's sometime during the reign of Maegor, Egg's dad, that the Lothstons finally fall. We don't know the exact year, but we can probably guess somewhere in the late 220s, early 230s. And they are brought down with the help of the Whents. The Whents are household knights. So it's like the Tyrells opening up the doors for the gardeners and giving the Targaryens the keys. The Whents, we can think of the Whents doing essentially the same thing. House Lothston falls, and Harrenhal now moves to Whent, former household knights of the Lothstons. And then it's awesome. We got to see another direct connection through the sigil. They keep the bat motif going.
Exactly. And so there could even be blood ties. Or it could just be that Lothston had been in charge so long, for 80 years or so, 70 years, that their authority had really sunk in. And so to seem like the lords of Harrenhal at that point, you want a bat sigil.
Yeah.
Because it's
I mean,
just also Danelle, like people are afraid of Danelle. So by keeping the bat symbolism, that may be what they were trying to do. Go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, cadet houses and branch houses are a thing. Whents could be the Lothstons, what Karstarks are to the Starks, like just this cousin branch. But what's important is that they take over.
9 generations of Lothstons. Maybe the first Whent was 9 generations deep. That's, you know.
But the important thing is that the Whents start in the 220s, and we don't know much about the Whents, but we do get occasionally things crop up. We get the tourney at Harrenhal, which is our big one. And what's also important to know is the Tully connection. Catelyn Tully's mother was a woman of House Whent. So the Stark children with their red hair and blue eyes, they have a Harrenhal connection through their grandmother on their mother's side.
Yes, and then there's also this thing with Shella. There's definitely some intermarriage. So someone in the chat is saying a Whent married a Lothston, and then a Whent inherited after House Lothston became extinct. Oh, you're proposing that? Okay, we don't know that a Whent married a Lothston, but that could be, right? We don't know that, right?
We don't know that. Again, that's why I think the Tyrell idea is a better one. That the Whent, again, Harrenhal is always a bargaining chip. If the Whents, being the household knights of House Lothston, are the ones to basically take them down and hand the keys to the Targaryens, they then get the prize.
So Manisa Whent, she married Walter Whent. They're both Whents by birth, so they're probably cousins. And it seems like what happened was that Manisa's father didn't have any sons, and so the castle passed to her, because it says that her father and grandfather were the lords of Harrenhal before her, but then she marries Walter Whent. So it's one of those things where the daughter inherited, but because of the patriarchy, to firm up her hold on it, she married a cousin who was also a Whent. So now we have 2 Whents that are married. They definitely possess the castle for the family, and they're probably, like second cousins or something like that. And then Manisa Whent is, we don't know the relation to Shella, but it could be that, I was wondering if Manisa was Shella's daughter, because
Probably.
that would be about the right age. But the thing is, Catelyn thinks of, quote, old lady Whent, the last of her line, who dwells in Harrenhal with her ghosts. But she doesn't think about her as my grandmother. So I'm guessing maybe that, again, cousins, something like that. But this is only a couple generations before the main story here. And in fact, when Arya's in Harrenhal, Lady Manisa Whent, her old smith, Ben Blackthumb, is still there. Ben Blackthumb is so old, he smithed for the Lothstons, and then is still the smith for the Whents. So he must be like really old.
Yeah. So we have, Lord Walter Whent and his brother. He has a brother, which is Oswell Whent, the member of the Kingsguard.
Right.
And it's presumably these connections that we get the scheming that becomes the tourney at Harrenhal, Rhaegar's planned coup. Your member of your Kingsguard who you're close to, his brother is a great lord of a big castle that can accommodate all of this. And that seems to be like the natural setup there.
Yeah, so Oswell Whent of the Kingsguard visits Walter Whent, and then right after Walter calls the tourney of Harrenhal. So, yeah, this is what kind of clues us into, like, this was part of Rhaegar's planning to try to put himself in position to peacefully depose Aerys. He's got to build alliances first and show himself to everyone. That's why I put on a good show at the tourney and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Then Howland Reed showed up from the Isle of Faces and was like, no, dude. No, this is a whole other thing you got to do. But check out my RLJ video. That's a different story. So we don't know when Walter died, but he is not around. Oswell died at the Tower of Joy, and so Lady Shella is the last of her line, except for that Lady Manisa married Hoster Tully, and so Lysa and Kat and Edmure are half Whent. So that is, and they all have the high cheekbones of the Whents, quote unquote. Kat and Sansa both have that.
Yeah, and the red hair, which gets passed on to all the Stark children except for Arya.
Right. Oh, that's true. Yeah, so the Tullys have red hair, but so do the Whents potentially from the Lothstons. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot to say about the Whents that we haven't already said. But let's talk about this little Harrenhal starting to trade hands here at the very end of the story. So she surrenders it to Tywin in 298 because she doesn't have hardly any. She's sitting there with her ghosts and her smith and a cook. So she can't man Harrenhal's walls against Tywin, right?
Yeah, that's why, like, it seems like they just show up and take it. She's like, I can't. It's like Simon Strong all over again. She's like, well, I can't do anything about it. What am I going to do? I guess I'll just give it to you. It's yours.
And we don't hear what happens to Shella Whent, but Peter Baelish tells Sansa that she has died in Feast. So we don't know if she stayed at Harrenhal while all these things were happening there, or if she went somewhere else. We just don't know. She probably was not killed horribly. She probably died from old age because we're not told. There's no clues about foul play. But who knows? Maybe Peter had her murdered, and we'll find that out later. But yes, so Tywin takes it. Then he leaves Vargo Hoat with it. He shows up in King's Landing, like I said, finds that Joffrey has given it to Janos and takes it back and gives it to Littlefinger, who has possessed it for like 2 years but has never gone there. And during that time, go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds more like when the Crown takes Harrenhal from Shella Whent and gives it to Janos Slynt. It seems like they're just using eminent domain. It seems to be really the thing of like, you're too old, you're not using it, you don't have any children, you don't have any heirs, you're going to die soon anyway, so we're just going to take it.
So yeah, and then we've seen the Crown dispose of Harrenhal before, so it's similar. They do that, and so yeah, all these people are cursed. Janos Slynt, his head is cut off by Jon Snow at the Wall, and Vargo Hoat, we talked about him. The Mountain feeds him his body parts. Tywin was killed. The Mountain's been killed in horrible ways, and all of this, we see all of this stuff through the eyes of course, and this was my House Whent slide. This is the Alone with Their Ghosts in Harrenhal picture. This is Alexander Borodin. Here's, of course, the tourney at Harrenhal, Pablo Pugione. We've all seen this image. We just talked about the tourney. And here's Amuk's Tower of Joy, so there's Oswald Whent. Now, it's the ghost of Harrenhal that gives us the POVs in Harrenhal. And, of course, Arya's story is heavily tied to Harrenhal. She goes through all kinds of horrors, but also begins to find power. She, through Jaqen Hagar's recruitment and giving her the 3 favors. I think Jaqen just made that up, by the way. He's just trying to recruit her. The gods aren't owed the deaths. I just think that's total. He just made that up. But I don't know. What do you think? He's trying to recruit Arya at that point, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that could be Jaqen, if we believe him that he's from Lorath, that could be him interjecting some of Lorathi culture into the Faceless Men, like emerging. Like we definitely see the Faceless Men they're not all Braavosi. They're coming from all over. So, and considering how they keep statues of all of the gods, it makes sense that their practices would also be like this intermeshing of different cultures and religions that they can bring to the table. So, but yeah, Jaqen's big thing, his big goal is to recruit Arya. It's more like the 3 lives. It's more like the 3 wishes from a genie type deal that he's granting her. But just your wishes are death.
And so here, this is Mark Simonetti. Yeah, very cool. In case you didn't notice, Arya is running here on top of this bridge. You can see her. That's her running. So she is the ghost in Harrenhal. And this, of course, sets up her Faceless Man arc. And she witnesses a lot of horror, too. So this is a big loss of innocence. She, kills a couple people. And yeah, it's complex. We should do some Arya content soon. This is by Mark Simonetti. No, this is Richard Hescox. The last one was Mark Simonetti. So here's Arya with her stick sword in the Harrenhal Godswood. Very scary looking weirwood. And the Twisted Tower in the background. So this is pretty cool. And yeah, did you have anything to say about any of the horrible things that happened there? Like she sees, obviously, Tywin march in and out, and she sees Vargo Hoad, and she helps free some of the prisoners. And I mean, there's lots to talk about there, but
it's more of the story of Arya becoming a faceless man even before she knew of the faceless men. It's the beginning of adopting all of these different personas when she's Arya and she's Ari and she's Weasel and she's the ghost. It's like, dropping your identity and taking on another in order to survive. And this is like the beginnings of that. And then it takes then we get our major dive when she gets to Braavos.
Someone in the chat is saying it's Tyrion that strips Harrenhal from Janos Slynt, not Tywin. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't remember that one solidly, but I'll take your word for it. So, yeah, and then the other thing that's interesting here about Arya's time in Harrenhal is like it's just like she's taken to this haunted castle and she's witnessing all these horrors. And it's kind of like a condensed version of the Feast for Crows idea.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like, oh, this world has some really dark stuff in it. And she comes out of this kind of hardened in a way. So it turns into a weird kind of boot camp for her.
Yeah. Yeah, because what happens is, Tyrion revokes it from Janos Slynt. The Mountain and the Mountain's men capture it. When they're out burning and pillaging the Riverlands, they take a hold of it. Tywin shows up for a time, makes camp there, then Tywin moves on. He leaves Amory Lorch in charge, and then that's when it's when Amory Lorch is in charge. That is when Arya frees the Northmen who have been locked up, and then it changes hand to Roose after that's done, and that's when she becomes Weasel.
So in a way, Arya is following in the witch tradition here. She is working magic and assassinating people and stuff. And she is becoming an avatar of the ghosts. And she's also an avatar of the Weirwood, too. And, of course, the Weirwood, some of the ghosts in Harrenhal are from the Weirwoods that were cut down and then burned. So that all kind of fits with Arya as this Weirwood assassin. And even the House of Black and White has Weirwood doors, too. So it continues that symbolism. The other thing to say about Arya is that this is all Batman stuff. Arya is Batman.
It is. It's all Batman stuff.
Yeah, so take a look. That's Lothston is the Batman sigil. Mm-hmm. And so Batman, of course, he sees both of his parents murdered in front of him. Arya sees both of her parents killed separately in front of her. She sees Ned's execution, and she's right outside the twins during the Red Wedding. Then Batman goes across the sea and joins Ra's al Ghul's League of Shadows and becomes an assassin. Arya goes and joins the Faceless Men. Jake and Hagar, Ra's al Ghul, even sound similar. Then
George, nerd.
What's that?
I said George, you nerd. This is when George's comic fandom really showing through with the Ra's al Ghul and the Faceless Men.
This is the first one I heard about that showed me like, he likes comics. So then Batman turns against the League of Shadows and leaves them. And Arya's probably going to do the same thing and have to contend with them. So yeah, it's all Batman stuff. Oh, she sees her mother's dead body as Nymeria. Very true, Golden Lady. Very true. Mm-hmm. That's not my theory. That one was around when I got to the fandoms in 2014. Batman. So there you go. And I think that's about all I have to say there. There's some more horror. Pretty Pia and the Tickler. There's definitely more horror that goes on in her chapters.
Yeah, she sees Amory Lorch get torn apart by a bear after Roose takes it.
That's right. That's right. So, and there maybe is something extra powerful about Jaime beginning his kind of sort of not redemption arc, but finding a moral compass arc at Harrenhal, this place that is so cursed. And he's like turning his life around there by doing something heroic. So that's kind of cool. Tickler is the Joker. Yeah, maybe. So, there you go. That's, unless you have anything else to add, that is pretty much the history of Harrenhal. There was a couple of comments that I wanted to do. Okay, so there's PayPal's. Kelly Johnson says Maegor is a great example of why it's a good idea to limit the perceived divine right of kings. Yes, that's true. Kelly also says, since we mentioned Chads, who are the 3 biggest Chads in A Song of Ice and Fire? I'll ask you that one. I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse of Chad energy. Since the Riverlands, God's Eyes foreshadowed to play a vital role in the final conflict as seen with Daemon and Aemond, in what ways the Riverlands going to play a role in the Dream of Spring? So this is something we wanted to talk about, and this was one of the YouTube comments. What about Euron taking Harrenhal at some point and becoming sort of in the image of Black Heron? It's a pretty easy thing to compare because Black Heron is trying to be an Ironborn king of Westeros.
Mm-hmm.
So is Euron. And I think he's going to be crowned at Old Town. But if he starts to conquer into Westeros, you could see him wanting to take Harrenhal since it's an Ironborn stronghold. And this could lead to a dragon fight over the God's Eye that seems like a replay. So what do you have to cook with there, Tim?
Yeah, because Euron, if we're gonna get this battle over the God's Eye 2.0 of Jon versus Euron as Daemon and Aemon stands in, then it makes sense that Euron would have to be at Harrenhal. And Euron already has Black Heron connections. In that that Valyrian steel armor is making him a black, like shrouded in black armor. And just as Heron the Black was moving past the point of thraldom into full-on slavery, Euron is steering the Ironborn into becoming slave traders. That is how when Roderick the Reader is questioning Euron on all this stuff that he does, Euron's plan to fund these endeavors is to do the slave trade, which is like, okay, but you're also trying to wed Dany. Do you not know what Dany is all about when it comes to freeing slaves? Like, that's a very big hole in your plan, Euron.
That's a great comparison. Heron's slavery to construct Harrenhal is actually the worst slavery in Westerosi history, recorded history that we know of. So that's a great parallel. So yeah, the more I think about this idea, the more I think it does make sense that Euron eventually will take Harrenhal.
Yeah. So that's why it also just lends more credence to the idea that Euron's Dany plan is not going to come to fruition. Maybe he'll get a dragon. He's definitely going to. I definitely see him stealing a dragon, but him wedding her is not going to happen. He's the antithesis to everything that Dany is trying to accomplish. It's like unless blowing the dragon horde actually brainwashes Dany as a symbolic dragon and not brainwashing a literal dragon to steal, I don't see how Dany could ever be attracted to Euron.
Well, we could talk about that a different time. I do have thoughts, but the stream is getting long in the tooth, and that's a whole another topic.
I do want to say, though, with Arya's story and the Curse of Harrenhal, there is a link on there, because when Arya frees the Northmen who are locked down in the Harrenhal jails, she thinks she's doing good. And in that moment, she is. But the butterfly effect, releasing those Northmen, is then what allows Roose to take over. And then Roose, when he turns cloak and sides with Tywin, and then that leads to the Red Wedding. Arya
It's so
unintentionally.
confusing when you first read that part. You're like, what's going on? Who's in charge? What? These are all
Yeah,
traitors.
it's unfortunate, but yeah, Arya unintentionally had a hand in setting up the Red Wedding by doing what she thought was the right thing. Because, I mean, she did. I mean, in her mind, yeah, letting the Northmen free and taking Harrenhal was great for her brother. She had no idea that Roose was planning what Roose was planning, but it did it. But it also it opened the road for him as well.
So the chat is asking about Euron and marrying Cersei. If he's taking Harrenhal, then he's passing through the Westerlands, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's an idea they got from George or if that's something they just made up. We'll just have to see. If there is going to be a thing, if Cersei is Hands of White Fire Lady, I guess you could say.
I mean,
Perhaps
right now,
he collects her from Casterly Rock. It's, not far from Old Town.
because Euron he's not near the Westerlands because he's going the Reach route. We had the Shield Islands, which are part of the Reach, and now he left behind some guys there who think they've been rewarded, but Euron's gifts are poison, and he is moving on to Old Town. So he's heading south, where the Westerlands are more up north. Unless he sends like some kind of brigade to Lannisport, which Ironborn are wont to do. It's in the cards, but not he himself.
There are precedents for Ironborn abducting Lannister women, so that is potentially a parallel.
Yeah, they sack Lannisport all the time, so it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's just that Euron himself is not heading in that direction. He's heading to Old Town.
Yeah, this would be a couple steps down the road, maybe even in the last book or the end of the next book. But yeah, I do like the idea of Euron at least going and taking Harrenhal for a time, and then of course he can suffer a nasty death, and we'll see the curse once again. And doesn't Euron fit the archetype?
Yeah, and
he's the most grasping, hubristic person in the whole story, so like he has to get Harrenhal.
And we've talked about, again, like how far are the others going to make it? It has to be further south than Winterfell. In order for the Long Night to have real merit, they need to get past through the north, and I see the God's Eye being their cutoff line. The others reach Harrenhal, they reach the God's Eye. This is where it's like, okay, now it's make or break now for the Green Men on the Isle of Faces at this point. Like, I think, like, yeah, so Euron taking Harrenhal as a Night's King figure and the others making it and freezing their way down to the Riverlands, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I don't know that we need to get too into the travel logistics, but like if Euron is moving from Old Town to the Harrenhal, then Cersei can be a part of that. They could be sending envoys before that to arrange the marriage, and Cersei could come meet him on the road with her, also, from Casterly Rock, or they could sail up to Casterly Rock and march inland. There's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, but I think it would be more like Euron tracing the path of Harren the Black and how they originally got to the Riverlands.
Right, go back up to the Iron Isles where more of his forces are and invade from there. Definitely could be. So we'll see, but I like the idea of him going to taking Harrenhal. That feels like the perfect last owner of Harrenhal could be Euron.
Yeah. And because, Euron has, again, he's the bad brother, Euron, bad brother, Harren the Black. All these, when we did like the Ironborn heraldry, all the connections Euron has to the most evil of Ironborn kings is all right there. So, of course, Harren the Black is right up there with it.
Now, the last idea I have for Harrenhal is totally opposite of Euron getting it. Since Peter has it, what if Sansa comes into it when she overthrows Peter or turn the tables on him or whatever she's going to do? What if Sansa comes into it? Because she is, again, part Whent and has this cool passage about the bat that ties her back all the way to Lothston, who could be skin changers like Sansa, who is a skin changer even though she's never used her magic. She still has the ability. George has said that. So, if somehow this comes back into the possession of Sansa, that could be an interesting coda, because then maybe we could have not a happy ending, but like some sort of final resolution to it. It also remind you of Rhaena caretaking Harrenhal, if Sansa is in charge of it somehow and figures out what to do with it. So maybe gives it to Gendry. I don't know.
I don't see it. What I see more likely with Euron taking Harrenhal is a repeat of Aemon One Eye. Aemon One Eye kills the entire castle garrison of Strongs. Who's at Harrenhal right now? Since Peter Baelish isn't actually sitting there,
oh God,
presumably we don't even know. It's whoever Peter Baelish has house sitting for him. So Euron showing up at Harrenhal and just putting everyone, all the small folk, everyone he comes across to the sword, the way that Aemon One Eye did when he took it. That's what I see playing out.
Yeah, I'm saying that Sansa could get it after that. I think maybe, like at the end when we're epiloguing and
No, I think but if Euron's going to take Harrenhal, some kind of atrocity needs to be committed.
Yeah, well, we need to sage the place. That's what I'm saying. Sansa can sage that place out a little bit, maybe.
Oh yeah, it needs it. We need an old priest and a young priest. The power of R'hllor compels you. The power of R'hllor compels you.
Oh, well, we are going to have a whole army of R'hllorists coming to Westeros with Dany. What if at the end of the story they didn't go back to Essos? What if they just like, oh, a burned castle. We love this. This looks like our temple, kind of. All we have to do is paint it.
We need to exercise Harrenhal. We need to exercise the entire Weirwood net. Like, yeah, we got to drive all these evil spirits
No, I'd
out.
love that. We start a new R'hllorist cult. They take over Harrenhal. They have plenty of people. They'll recruit more. And we just have a big fire cult in the melted castle. That's awesome. We do know it's the Holy Hundred that has Harrenhal. Oh, what's that guy's name? Bonifer Hasty?
Oh, him.
Him.
Yes.
That's right.
Oh,
Thank you, Brienne's fat sister.
Oh my God. Well, then Euron killing the Holy Hundred, that would be Euron killing the Faith. Ironborn driving out the Faith. That's another thing Ironborn are want to do.
Bonifer Hasty. Yeah, that's him.
Oh, yeah. Euron, I think Bonifer Hasty's gonna have to go up against Euron.
That would make a great atrocity for Euron to commit. Oh, I'm so glad we thought of that. Oh.
Yeah, to kill a bunch of warrior sons. Spitting in the face of the gods. Yeah.
A little Maegor the Cruel follow-up, too.
Yep.
I like it.
I think we cracked it. I think, Euron's just going to show up and he's just going to be every terrible king in the past all rolled into one.
So the Holy 100 isn't really 100. That's funny because the Hall of 100 Hearths isn't really 100 either.
Yeah, and there aren't really 1,000 swords in
Thank you, Five Son. Appreciate you. You're at work listening. He's not the Lord of Harrenhal, no, but he's taking care of it. Oh, it's an anagram for bonfire.
Bonfire.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, check out our bonfire store, bonfire merch store with our T-shirts in the link below the video. Oh, nice. Well done. Well done, Orion Washburn. Bonfire hasty. Oh, gosh, a hasty bonfire. That's the kind that you have at Harrenhal, isn't it?
Oh.
That's awesome.
Bonifer hasty.
That's called teamwork.
Oh, jeez.
Cool. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop unless you have anything else, Tim. We pretty much rinsed out this Harrenhal business.
Just that his alias is Bonifer the Good, and then Euron is the bad. Yeah, it seems pretty cut and dry. That guy's not long for this world.
He might get burned. That might be too obvious if he gets burned, but
he's getting Euroned.
Well, Euron might have a dragon by the time he takes Harrenhal.
True.
So this really could be like Maegor and Aemond coming on a dragon to genocide people and burn people.
The hasty bonfire, if Euron with his dragon lights one of the towers aflame.
I think we've got some winter predictions that we just did here, Tim.
Yeah. and that's the thing too. I said the next time that we have Euron as our main topic of discussion, I will talk about Lovecraft's dragons because that even more credence to a lot of this. That's a topic for another day.
Cool. Well, subscribe to the Grey Waste Tim channel, and make sure you subscribe to my channel, and get yourself some Praise Garth shirt or Reading Rhaegar. I ordered a Reading Rhaegar and a Nana Vagar because I didn't have one, so I've got those on the way. And yeah, we actually are gonna do a Euron stream soon. We might do one next week. I was thinking about it. My plans have been changing like Illyrio's lately.
Don't push it up on my account. I can always put a pin in it. I just know that the next time he is our main topic, it's something that I'm kicking myself that I'd never brought up before.
No, so I mean, because I'm working on some Old Town content in general. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's good stuff coming. So,
but if you want an inside peek on Lovecraft's Dragons, subscribe to my channel and check out my Lothston video for more of this Harrenhal stuff, and check out the stream quest of Unknown Kadath, where I break down Lovecraft's story, Unknown Kadath, and the role that's played on George's story. Lovecraft's Trigonic creatures all appear in that story.
That's one of the few Lovecrafts that I've read. That was a pretty cool story, Dream Quest. That one left a mark on me for sure. Definitely made an impression. So yeah, Tim's channel, you got to check out the Lothston video. That's a really cool one. It goes well with this. So, yeah, I will have a video coming out this week, according to my intentions, about Jace and Bela. I still need to record it, so it's going to be short. I should be able to do it. But that's my next Hot Dragon video, is a Jace and Bela Season 2 MVPs coming your way. And I think I'm also going to do a Daemon and Rhaenyra video. I'm going to analyze their relationship, Tim.
Next for me will be the next Be Like video. And then the goal is after that, Dany and the Lemon Trees. And then after that, going back to this, the Wine of Warlocks, the Ashai Absinthe connection from that Tyrion chapter.
Cool.
I definitely got more on Absinthe and its symbolism.
Well, that's good, because I want to get into some of that Ashai stuff as well. But we'll have to. I've got a lot of ideas I'd like to do that are just going to have to wait until after Hot Dragon season, because it's basically almost here. We're like 20 days away. So, yeah. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your Sunday and the rest of the basketball game. And I think, Dallas and Boston. Somebody was asking. That's tough. I used to really talk down Boston's chance of winning a title, but I think Tatum has really improved a lot. He's beefed up. He's going inside more. Jaylen Brown looks a lot better than he did 2 years ago. And Holiday's making those big plays at the end of the game. So I'd say that's a real toss-up with Dallas and Boston. That's going to be a good series. Going to be a lot of foul baiting, but that's true of almost everyone. So I'd go ahead and pick Dallas in 7, I guess, but that could go either way. You have a pick, Tim? You care about basketball?
I don't watch basketball.
Okay. All right, chat. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Been a beautiful audience. Cheers.